All right. Welcome, June 12th. Crazy here. Just came back from a run and whatnot. Um, Congratulations, SpaceX. SpaceX IPO is live. So that is how we'll start today. Um, Basic overview, guys. The intention here is to create a place of persistent conversation where we got to have better Bitcoin conversations, okay? But Monero is out there, Zcash is out there, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, BNB, this whole stack of assets on the market with trade-offs and all kinds of stuff. And in order for us to all exponentiate the value that we can create together, we've got to be better players of the game, better to understand, because man, we're trying to achieve Nash equilibrium. Okay, so that's a state in which all players in a game are maximally advantaged, commensurate with their skill level and available move set. So SpaceX guys, we're trading at $171. That's wild. Ticker SPCX, not financial advice. But yeah, word was I think we opened at 135. I actually thought it was like 133. Doesn't matter. So the open gets a pre-market pushed it up to 150. Wow, market cap 2.238 trillion, ladies and gentlemen. 2.238 trillion. Wow. Wow. Well done. So 26.77%. We know that we've got, I think they had like 75 billion. It was issued, to retail. So, we'll see. Again, I think the maximum, the way to maximize this return, we cook it. We cook it. You know what I mean? And word is, and again, go do your own research. There are different metrics, different unlocks depending on the price performance. So if SpaceX, for instance, hits, 20% was probably one of the targets that would clear people to sell more shares, quite frankly. But again, go do your own research, figure that out. But honestly, I would say charts are looking pretty good. It looks like we didn't have a crazy crash. Like, man, 21 Capital, come on, Jack Mahlers. But cheers to Jack Mahlers for asking Michael Saylor relevant questions about the MNAV. And did you hear Saylor's response, bro? Man, talk about a ramble about the fiat industrial complex that he's incorporated into the 21 million Bitcoin set, man. So yeah, we definitely need better conversations on Bitcoin. So I mean, as far as SpaceX, there really is not a lot to say without making it an entire SpaceX centric, whatever. Like we could talk about the forward, we could talk about SpaceX as a primary revenue stream. That's great. I mean, rather Starlink, mass to orbit. We talk about quantum computation. We talk about modular nuclear energy technology deployed on the moon, and all kinds of really cool stuff that SpaceX has to look forward to as far as future valuations. So and technology implementations. Obviously, shout out to Gwen Shotwell, I believe, name of the CEO of SpaceX. She was talking about she mentioned the synergies that exist between Tesla and SpaceX, and that perchance one day there might be an opportunity for some sort of collaborative entity and or effort, but she very shrewdly said, you know what, like let's keep this going, because there is a lot to commend SpaceX for. So congratulations, Elon Musk. Congratulations, SpaceX holders. I mean, man, if you participated in this venture, congratulations. So now here's I think where this has relevance for blockchains, is that the capital that is participating in the SpaceX IPO And then the coming Anthropic IPO, all these AI, plays and whatnot that we've got, ahead of us. And then in the context of the Clarity Act, um, when laws and legislations are getting right, the Martha Pelosi cook would probably look something like get participation in SpaceX, book some fat multiples there, hit that Anthropic IPO, but then where do you book some of that cash, right? Are you booking it to cash, no, right? Maybe that goes into the Bitcoin set and the broader, blockchain environment and whatnot, and particularly in the context of artificial intelligence companies, because blockchain technology is the native monetization layer for these agentic intelligences and all kinds of interesting businesses and whatnot that are going to be created. So yeah, man, looking at the markets, so SpaceX is up, it's doing really well, but looking at Bitcoin, it's holding pretty well, guys. And also peace talks in Iran. I am so bullish on peace. So let's hope that moves forward, and yeah, yeah, I don't want to put the tinfoil hat on and talk about like this market opportunity and all of the events of this weekend. There's this big event coming up in DC. This Freedom 250 event with the UFC from the lawn of the White House. You know what I mean? So there's a lot happening in America right now, where, and we would be remiss and we would be if we didn't appreciate the citizens united of it all, the ways in which these liquidity flows are participant. And I think that's really the chief reason to be looking at, at least for immediate markets, looking at the performance of the SpaceX IPO is that, yeah, that capital that's participating is more blockchain native. They're more aware of that technology. They're also more aware of the inflationary environment with the dollar. I'm bullish, man. You know what I think has really been missed in the context of this, like the Clarity Act and the Federal Reserve, and will they, won't they cut rates? Everyone can win here. Banks can get their rate cuts, and DeFi protocols can offer free market competition as well. They very well should be. I mean, the cool thing about open source code is it doesn't ask for permission. 2 + 2 is going to equal 4. You know what I mean? And laptops running around the world, are run multiple blockchains. So it's powerful. It's powerful to look at how capital is going to flow and how it's going to be expressed in the future. And so yeah, man, shout out to SpaceX. $171 and 14 cents, up $36 since the market opened, 26.77%. So yeah, man, we can look at that chart again, maybe at the end of the stream. As far as yeah, man, better Bitcoin conversations. So 100%, right? As mentioned the other day, most of the Bitcoin content that is produced is bought and paid for by people that tend to be maximalist adjacent, if not outright toxic. Many of them do, with different hats, lots of trolls, all this kind of stuff. Shout out to Michael Saylor talking about that, how he was not going to be influenced by some toxic Bitcoin trolls about whether he will or won't sell his Bitcoin. Now, that having been said, that is an important conversation to have. There is an introduction by virtue of Stretch, for instance. There's an 11.25% encumbrance on the Bitcoin supply. Strategy holds a significant quantity of Bitcoin, more than 850,000, and of a 21 million unit total supply. And I mean, they sold the 32 Bitcoin. Price falls like what, $6,000, $7,000, whatever the heck it was, and then they buy 1,500, right? So I mean, great, the trend is whatever, but there's also, think about that, right? To be able to chicken little the market psychologically, because intermediate and immediate markets are more driven by psychology rather than fundamentals, and that's an important thing to appreciate. So yeah, so Bitcoin's actually it's holding up really, really great. 0.52%. So I would call that flat. Litecoin, 0.82%, $43. Ethereum down 0.98. So down around 1%, but I would consider that more or less flat. Ethereum's at 1667. Solana, 0.88 at 67. And Cardano's over 17 cents. So congratulations, Cardano, getting over the 16-cent mark. That is a big win. So they're up in the last 24 hours, 1.61%, and that's the power of, these smaller market caps, and the psychology also of a sub-dollar asset. You can stack those multiples. So when you really look at it, through the lens of capital efficiency and capital expression, it's the market's kind of moving more or less in tandem. Um, Love to see it. Love to see it. I'm curious as far as Iran peace talks. Um, so yeah, I'm just kind of looking at some of the headlines, man. I it's so yeah, there's claims that there is a peace deal close. Man, here's hoping, man. Here's hoping, Um Man, that's why we cannot discount Bitcoin taking 100K again before the end of this year, before Christmas. If you imagine if we get peace. Oh, so going back to like Clarity Act and how we can advantage the DeFi and we can get the rate cuts without, well, inflation is what it is, right? But one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve didn't do the rate cut, right, is like if you make money cheaper, the printer goes burr, people issue more credit, ergo you inflate the supply, and every dollar that any individual holds loses its economic leverage, devoid of commensurate gross domestic product growth. So shout out to again SpaceX. um yeah, man, so many pieces there. So Clarity Act, right? So Clarity Act and advantaging the banks and DeFi. If DeFi takes some percentage of the deposits, less than 10%, right? First, in the first 24 months, it'll be, it'd be awesome if we could get to 7%. But you could argue that the the extent to which deposits are removed from a traditional bank and the fractional reserve banking to which they are privy, right? So if you have $100,000 and you've got this person that's got two choices, they can deposit their money in a traditional bank, or they can pursue DeFi, decentralized financial opportunities on these myriad blockchains. What impact on the dollar? Going into a traditional bank, you could have a 10-to-1 or more, depending on how aggressively that banking institution is willing to pursue, it's the extension of credit, you know. And last I checked, Glass-Steagall really isn't in effect anymore. So, which is, essentially these banks don't need a whole lot of deposits on hand, but that's why they're pushing back against stablecoin yield, is they don't want their deposits touched. Because, right, so you could go to the traditional bank and what do? They make about 20 something percent on your deposits and give you 3%, you know? Whereas DeFi, right, if you go to DeFi, the banks lose their deposits, but what does the customer gain, right? Definitely may take different risk environment, not FDIC insured, for instance, but it's also not creating a bunch of extra new dollars in the system. It's not privy to the fractional reserve that banks are, which is another reason why it doesn't need the oversight, because the DeFi inherently is not going to introduce the inflation as explicitly into the US dollar denominated economy, in the same way that banking deposits and the legacy encumbrance of the operation of the banking apparatus as it is and the financial systems globally, in a fiat, regime and denominated, environment and such. So I'm bullish on Bitcoin, guys. I think, yeah. Oh, so landing the plane on that Clarity Act. So there is a way in which, the banks and DeFi can win. Let go of the damn yield thing, bro, and get the rate cuts. Because look at that. If you're the chairman or whatever, the new Federal Reserve chairman, right? You could say, bro, we are a hub of innovation. We are not in a time where we're trying to drive business offshore from America. You know what I mean? Not even going into the beef and the tariffs and all this, although there is a whole tariffs for the stick and crypto's the carrot. But before you can offer the carrot, you need clarity, right? If you are about to advantage Bitcoin in international trade, guys, that is, I think, a huge bellwether, and a huge, arrow in the quiver of the United States, and the powers that be, vis-a-vis the global economy, is to introduce and advantage Bitcoin in international trade. And if I'm an international partner, I'm more encouraged by Bitcoin, because even with the Michael Saylors and BlackRock doing their paperwork to offer yield products on Bitcoin, there's still that 21 million unit protocol level agreement, that universal state of economic fair play, that anyone in the world with an internet connection and a smart device can interface with the Bitcoin layer. They can store the value there. I mean, the Promethean fire of freedom that Satoshi Nakamoto lit, with the release of the white paper Halloween night 2008, Genesis block January 3rd, 2009, was for the first time everyone on the planet with an internet connection and a smart device could custody the capital that they create in a finite life, and participate in that exchange. It's like, man, today you have some brilliant young person creates a music album, right? And they want to monetize. They can now monetize that, lock that value that is created in their art in a ledger that BlackRock, that Strategy, that oil companies and nations, the Kingdom of Bhutan, a lot of folks are participating in. And to have that ubiquity of access is powerful. Now, granted, the cost regime, it's a heck of a lot, right? It's $63,800. And again, shout out to Bitcoin, holding up really well. My thesis really is the true value, not fair, but the true value of Bitcoin is closer to 69 to 72,000. This is really people shorting, trying to shake out as much of the loose coins as they can before Clarity Act, and then we start cooking. Because, bro, if you imagine we get peace in Iran, because every day that we're in Iran, we're printing $1 billion. And even if we start winding that back, like, again, let's go to peace. There's so many better things that we could be doing with our money as a country. But in just the efforts in Iran alone, we're printing $1 billion to the national debt. We were already at a pace where we were growing at $1 trillion every 100 days. $1 trillion. Bro, when Bill Clinton was president, the national debt was like 6 trillion. So we're printing it, and that's from the founding of the nation to Bill Clinton, or whenever we, the treasuries and all this kind of shit. Point of the matter is, shout out to the Louisiana Purchase. In the 90s, bro, we were way less than 10 trillion. We were at 6-ish. And the budget was actually balanced. Revenues met our obligations, and we actually had a surplus. So it wasn't that we didn't have debt. It was that we are making enough revenue, and we can pay our debt, we can service and have more, which is great. So it set the debt on a glide path to zero over some period of years. Could have been 20, 30, 50, I don't know, but balanced and going, keeping all the things like Social Security as it was, and it is just frozen in time in the 90s, right? Now, granted, you're riding the dot-com boom. Right now we got the SpaceX IPO cooking, and AI. So it's interesting because there is the golden thread, man, in the global markets. I listened to that, like Larry Fink, when he was like when he's modeling 1929 and 2029, you gotta pay attention to that. And so you want to, hope for the best. You want to be ready for what comes. You know what I mean? And so if you're looking at America as a predominant player, Bitcoin really is Really, really is their move because of the realities that confront the dollar. So, um, yeah, shout out to it. 1.27 trillion. How wild is that, guys? The SpaceX IPO is like $1 trillion more than Bitcoin, just off the rip. Now, granted, right, private company for a long time, and so it's not like it's just overnight. It's that tale of a decade plus to become an overnight sensation. Um, but yeah, man, I'm bullish as hell on this, dude. Because yeah, if I was it, man, right? If you had made your exposure to something like a SpaceX, when you start looking at booking profit in a post Clarity Act world, man, the Bitcoin sub 100K, again, especially sub 69K, you know, because this is institutional suppression and size games with yeah with these institutional players. Um, but yeah, man, post Clarity Act, um, you're going to have an environment where the powers that be and international partners are going to have, an established framework, so that folks know, oh shit, cool. So this can go on a treasury balance sheet this way, that way, the other. Granted, MicroStrategy and BlackRock are already proofing a lot of that work and that precedent out, um, and that's dope. That's really, really, really dope. Um, yeah, man. Yeah. The markets are doing good. I think it's going to be a good weekend. I would be prepared, going into next week just because, right? Peace deals fall out or just who knows. The piece that to me, and it's psychologically more than anything, because at the end of the day, there is a will to move towards peace because it doesn't maximally advantage anyone. Just because we're printing a lot of money, issuing defense contracts, even, it doesn't mean that we're making America safer. Because what's wild is we have so much military might, but we're undermining our economic foundation. You know, and that's the pyramid on which the apparatus rests. And so we got to honor the opportunity. um and we have precedent of not honoring the obligations, to, quite frankly, even protect the Constitution of the United States. Shout out to Brian McGinnis and the Marines. um yeah. So yeah, speaking of a better Bitcoin conversations, that's another piece that I think really needs to be discussed more. Is that Bitcoin, is hope. I often say hope is an acronym for how oppressed people escape. The people are more and more oppressed by a monetary regime that does not serve the interests of the average person, has totally purchased the politics, which is supposed to represent of by and for us, representing our interests. Not supposed to have things like taxation without representation. You know, but in a world of citizens united that equates dollars with speech, it becomes these well-moneyed interests have a louder voice with respect to our representation, you know, in law. And and then here we are. And then we have to deal with folks like Elizabeth Warren attacking the only things when we know that the people that should be like keeping the ship, uh, healthy and going forward and whatnot, are beyond derelict in their duty, you know? And so if we know we cannot trust the apparatus to operate optimally, it was such a charitable characterization, but we can't even expect the apparatus such as it is, the governmental apparatus, just broadly, but in the United States, for instance, even, I think provably we can say there is a lot of issues with gerrymandering, voter suppression here, odd voting machinery. I mean, yeah, when you do lose paper ballots and it's all electronic ballots, you know, and then the people that are making the machines are also like donating to some of these parties and shit, right? I mean, so yeah, dude, you do your research and you go, oh, okay, right? But just now in the era of Citizens United, we see that we've got politicians that, enter office and they're making 160 grand a year or 175, whatever they pay these folks. And then in 6 years, they're worth 30, 40, 50 million dollars, you know? And it's because they are privy to private companies that want to be able to sell a new product, spray vegetables with a certain whatever. These companies are going to want to do that for whatever reason, right? Because there are advantages to being able to just spray poison on whatever, because you can at least make it look pretty. um, which who knows if it'll kill you or not. But yeah, just turning off this. Speaking of apparatus, but yeah, man, when you get the corruption of money in our politics, it introduces all manner of problems. And so now we don't even have effective governance in things that the people need because the average person can't afford like an unexpected $500 expense. Last year was like 1,000 was the number that was often used or quoted. Um, but yeah. But nowadays, with student debt payments, going live again, man, you know, um, the layoffs all across America. And that's another reason why like this Clarity Act is just wrong, with the anti-competitive behavior of banks is we are living in a time where the average American we've had thousands and thousands of families sacrificed, people trying to pay mortgages and raise families, sacrificed on the altar of creative destruction because AI does a job better. It's like, hey, look, you worked for Cisco for a while, or hey, Nancy, you were really great at the front desk. We loved your emails and your spreadsheet work, but you were 74 grand. Claude is $2,000. In tokens a year, and it'll be fine. You know what I mean? Obviously, numbers out of my ass there, but and so if we're saying that the average American citizen and just folks globally, they have to compete. They are subject to the life and the death, the realities of a free market, and yet banks get to lobby Congress, the people that are writing these laws for how we are going to allow creation to thrive in America. And boomers that are 65, the average 20 something and 30 something barely understands what a blockchain is. Barely. You telling me Elizabeth Warren and even like shout out though to like Cynthia Lummis and whatnot and Caitlin Long. Shout out to Caitlin Long. At least they're having the conversation. Now, granted, they're also being lobbied. A lot of Ethereum money. Shout out to Ethereum. But which has its own influence, right? So a lot of the legislation favored some of these assets over others. Now, fortunately, there is language. There are people. I mean, that was one thing that Gensler. I mean, how many folks know that Gensler taught cryptocurrency and blockchain courses at, I believe, MIT prior to becoming the head of the SEC for his whatever, how long ever his tenure was, and so that gentleman knew very, very well, for instance, that you can any auspice by which you would grant Bitcoin so like digital commodity status, you could not deprive that of Litecoin. Anything that Bitcoin qualifies for, Litecoin does as well. And it's the suits and the powers that be and people being paid that introduces this suppression, in the expression and the opportunities in the markets. These suits, these people that are pursuing toxic maximalism and Bitcoin only, the only way to make Bitcoin a CBDC is to cook the Max Kaiser recipe. And for folks that don't know, he's a guy that champions toxic maximalism. But could you imagine being trapped playing capitalism with Bitcoin as the only asset with BlackRock and strategy, right? And so now again, then the average retail participant with nowhere else to go. You know, they got fiat and they own the 21 million unit network. They've introduced, a fiat industrial complex into the Bitcoin set with these traditional institutions. You know, now shout out to the folks out there, having the conversation that custody is the way in which self custody. There's a spectrum of custody options. It is important to be well versed in all of them and the trade offs and the benefits and da, 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 da. But one of the powerful things about migrating supply of things like the 21 million Bitcoin set, the 84 million Litecoin set from centralized exchanges into self custody is it imposes honesty on the spot prices because centralized exchanges don't have float. They can't say, "Oh, we're good for it. We'll just update your account and then we'll make it good later." Um, so yeah, the imposition of honesty on the markets is important. But if we privilege Bitcoin and we say Bitcoin doesn't have to compete anymore, we create an anti-competitive environment, right? The fact that you can arbitrage sailors manipulation and institutional manipulation of the Bitcoin set, or do you want to, if you're like, oh man, Bitcoin's probably at a high right now, so am I going to sell some for dollars? You could, but remember what you're doing there, right? You're one of the great virtues of Bitcoin is that you can escape fiat inflation and the decoupling of money from state and the power apparatus and all this really cool stuff. But among other things, that inflation piece, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. Now, like how a dollar has 100 pennies in it. One Bitcoin has 100 million smaller fundamental units in it, called a Satoshi is what we call it. And when one Satoshi is equal to one penny, one Bitcoin will be worth $1 million. And that will occur within the next 10 years. I think, yeah, comfortably, I would say that. But I don't model anything beyond 10 years because it's irrational, and quite frankly, the macro models that to me make the most sense to spend time on are now to 2029. Really map that out, understand those liquidity flows. So there's we get SpaceX IPO, huzzah! We're going to get some major AI related IPOs, huzzah! There's probably going to be some rollouts, data infrastructure announcements, huzzah! And as Larry Fink pointed out, they're mostly centralized players are winning, and we need more medium and small size participants that are winning, to actually maximize the productivity that we can realize with the opportunity. Whereas if we funnel it in, we run into the Jeff Bezos only needs one pairs of pants problem, so we need to definitely, maximize that, that production possibility frontier curve, so to speak. Yeah. So better Bitcoin conversations, 100%. And then, the third thing, so the way that I, shout out to about the 30-minute mark. Shout out to just shout out to the universe out there. Just checking stream health here. Let me navigating here for a second. Cheers, guys. Yeah. Sorry, guys. 1 second. Shout out. Very cool. Anyway, so yeah, so SpaceX, large inflow. Where's that capital going to go? It's not going to flow back to dollars. Some will, because the dollar isn't going anywhere overnight. But the it's how healthy it is. That's going to change. And that's where and you look at something like an XRP. And so speaking of better quality conversations in the Bitcoin community, you say something like that in some of these in some of these circles, and just the vehement vitriol, and the toxicity that comes out, and it's just like you're literally depriving of yourself of the ability to navigate reality. You're just choosing, it's a very childish and destructive approach. XRP exists. For folks who don't know the genesis of XRP, Bitcoin launches, right? Litecoin launches. The technology starts proving itself. And basically, the folks behind XRP went to the banks and said, see this blockchain technology? It's going to eat international settlements lunch. This beats 3 to 5 business days. If you want to move $1 billion of value from America to the UK, you can do it like that, you know? So that technology exists and is coming. So are you going to get your lunch ate, or are you going to get into bed with us? And so that's why, and how XRP more or less is the banker's blockchain. We can rage against that reality or not, but is what it is. And we cannot rationally model expectations of tomorrow. For instance, assuming that banks cease to exist tomorrow. It's just not going to happen. My bet would be that banks certainly will exist. Um, and as a result, they're one of the primary avenues of participation into the blockchain environment. I would suspect that that asset will, at the very least, participate in what we can expect to be orders of magnitude of flow entering into the blockchain environment. So in that rising tide lifts all ships model, where you've got Bitcoin is kind of like the cantus firmus. It's that baseline of the space. It's what's really provides the ocean. And then you've got these mighty rivers. Like the Nile and the Yangtze and the Amazon. Um, you know, uh, Flowing into it from these other blockchains. There's all kinds of different ways that you can model this flow. But as Bitcoin rises, when you see Bitcoin boom go up to that 150 and beyond, which is, I think, where we're the next major liquidity influx event. We're going to eventually hit a new all-time high. And in that environment, something like an XRP, like what is XRP trading at right now? Speaking of that, okay, yeah. It's roughly sideways. It's down 0.38% on the 24. And again, Bitcoin's up only 0.3. So that's more or less a sideways movement. And again, when you've got one asset that's 60 something grand and one's $1.12, at a $70 billion dollar market cap with XRP. But yeah, man, XRP is actually looking pretty strong there, holding that dollar really well. And I would very much expect it to at this point. To have pretty robust support around that $1 mark, because, right, if you're seeking to sort of be that solution for international settlements for the banking system, it does make sense to be at least somewhere around $1 or a multiple thereof. So it's these kinds of things, right? If we know that Bitcoin is actually a more freedom maximizing asset, and I would say that. Why? Because Bitcoin is not encumbered with those legacy interests of the banks. Furthermore, XRP, right? I like that it has a maximum hard cap supply of 100 billion. Currently, and this is new, the circulating supply is now just over 62 billion. So shout out to them. Last time I looked, it was like 61 and then some. And it says there's about 534,000 holders. So that's they're doing good, man. So when you look at those, but looking at that circulating supply, right, there's still 40, roughly 40 to 38 billion left in like treasury for these entities. Whereas with Bitcoin, right, there's only going to be 21 million. There's already 20 million in circulation. There's only 1 million more Bitcoin to be issued, and asymptotically approaching that issuance, roughly the year 2140. So for the next like 120 years, we got to the first, 20 million Bitcoin were emitted in this first 17 years and change. And then the last million will be over the course of the next 120 plus years, and then by then it'll be transaction fees, the use of the blockchain, that will sort of facilitate. And then we can talk about energy budget, security budget. People talk about, oh, well, if, like, for instance, if the Bitcoin block reward keeps halving and then you're just running on transaction fees, well, what if for validating a block, someone only gets a quarter of a Bitcoin or 0.12 of a Bitcoin, and you go, what? Well, $1 million Bitcoin, 1.2 is 120K, double what it is right now, right? So there's that, and this is another reason when you look at the core versus knots, you want people using the blockchain. Bitcoin taps out at about 7 transactions per second. And that's a reality, you know. Shout out to Wolfenden. Good to see you, bro. Um, but yeah, you want people using Bitcoin. Because that is ultimately what pays the miners, the validating network. But what's really, really cool is we have engineering done, papers published, code implemented that shows that we can you because Bitcoin's going to be running. Bitcoin's been running for 17 years. My bet is it's got at least another 10 in it. Get this, Cardano, an EUTXO based blockchain. So it's got the same basis, it's got smart contract responsiveness, all this. That's been going for about, well, the blockchain's been going for about, I want to say 7 years. Um, and so it's more than 30,000 times as energy efficient because it's a proof of stake. Ouroboros proof of stake. Very, very cool. It's getting like all kinds of neat upgrades. But get this, by allowing the solution and validation of the blockchains to choose either a proof of work or proof of stake network validation, um, when you use them concurrently, they're found to be optimally fungible. So get this, these doomers that are saying, and here's where the toxic maximalists need to really, here's why the conversation sucks. Because this argument that I'm about to make, that Steelman's Bitcoin, these effing R-worded max, these gutter folks are deprive themselves of this rebuttal for people that say it right now costs $250,000, pulling a number out of my ass, but actually I think it's about 60 something thousand dollars per Bitcoin in energy costs when you normalize it around the world. Now, there are folks that might be on a geothermal rig in Norway. Could you imagine that? Having steel rods going into the ground, conducting volcanic activity from the earth, creating steam, running turbines perpetually, right? So there are installations that can pretty much for zero cost energy validate the Bitcoin ledger and the Cardano ledger. Now, again, Cardano more than 30,000 times as energetically efficient. Now, those people that are like, well, Bitcoin will fail because, yeah, what happens when there's only a quarter of a Bitcoin for a block and it costs $250,000? Or because they'll take today's numbers and then they'll extrapolate for the cost of energy. But remember, modular nuclear energy technology, shout out to Westinghouse, right? SpaceX, again, IPOs cooking for folks that are not aware, right? Tesla does energy storage. So there's a lot of reasons why Bitcoin is going to be just fine, but one of the best, the strongest argument and rebuttal is that there is a bridge that already exists to allow Bitcoin to persist with more than 30,000 times as much energetic efficiency while maintaining or bettering its current security paradigm. Because there's a notion called a Nakamoto coefficient. And that has to do with the decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanisms associated with these various blockchains. So that's a lot of words to say the hardware that holds the publicly distributed ledger, which is the history of all of the, what are all the addresses that exist in the network and what are the balances associated with those addresses. That hardware that does that, you want that to be all around the world. Because if it's not, it can be stopped. Da 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 da. So when you look at Bitcoin, because it is so expensive, and you've got things like you got Michael Saylor on one side. Now the supply of Bitcoin is not the validator set. That's another thing that a lot of people don't quite get. Michael Saylor could own 5 million Bitcoin, right? His goal is 1 million, and then keep going, right? But his first goal is like, let's get to the million. Um, um, yeah, my brain. Oh yeah. Whatever supply he holds, he has no impact on the validation of the blockchain because it is proof of work, and you've got the Bitcoin mining network doing its work. Where you run into the centralization problem on the validator set is when you look at Marathon Digital, that's a publicly traded company. The stock ticker is MARA. I believe Fred Thiel, Peter Thiel's brother, is the head of Marathon. And interestingly enough, not only do Marathon now they've pivoted some of their portfolio to validation of AI. And that's actually really cool. A lot of the some of the hardware that is associated with the validation of these blockchains can also be used to validate AI models and participate in that value creation. Um, and Marathon Digital has said publicly that they have not only Bitcoin on their balance sheet because they're running mining hardware, right? Now, some other entities, Clean Spark, they focus on renewable energy sources. There's Riot Platforms. There's so there's these are just publicly traded companies that run the mining hardware. But now think about that, right? When Satoshi released the Bitcoin white paper on Halloween night 2008, and then started running the network January 3rd, depending on where you were in the world, 2009, and then we got our boy Hal running running Bitcoin. Um, in those days, it was laptops. It was the laptop class. You didn't need $250,000 to be a fully validating like participant in the Bitcoin ledger because the hash rate was very, very low. So built into Bitcoin is something called a difficulty adjustment. Okay. So every like 18-ish days, the protocol says how many people are trying to validate blocks, and it measures how many people are trying by hash rate. And so you can live figure out how many folks are trying to solve the random math problems, because the way that the validation works on Bitcoin is to win a block reward, you have to solve a random math problem. That cuts out a lot of the ability for a bad guy to put himself in position to be an asshole. So that's the first thing. He's got to levy enough hash rate that he can solve the random math problem first to be able to raise his hand and say, haha, right? But then the second thing is whatever they say their block is going to contain, that exact assignment of UTXOs to all of the addresses on the ledger that currently exist has to agree with at least 51% of all of the other copies of the ledger. So what's really interesting is that's where, going a little kind of deep here, how the Lightning Network supports the validator set. Lightning Network is a custodial secondary layer scaling solution to help Bitcoin transcend its 7 transaction per second limit. But Lightning Network nodes hold a copy of the entire Bitcoin ledger, which is only 1 terabyte. Now, Solana's 600. It's like half as old 600 times. Think about that. That's chain bloat. That's not good. Centralizing. When we look at how much does it cost in hardware to participate? So this is the kind of thinking. Energy costs, hardware scaling up, right? So this difficulty adjustment in Bitcoin, if you increase hashing power. So there's something called ASICs. That's called an application specific integrated circuit. This is one of the things that Charlie Lee also solved for initially when he released Litecoin, is because he also noticed that Bitcoin was leaving the laptop class because so Litecoin was released October 2011. It's been cooking for, it'll be 15 years this October. Shout out to Litecoin. 84 million UTXO based with MWeb fungibility and privacy. Powerful, powerful. So they choose, it's also proof of work, but it's about 16 times as energetically efficient natively. It has to do with the calculus of curves and the elliptic curve cryptography that is associated with the mathematics. And some solutions are better arrived at using CPU versus GPU. And so at the time, there were not application-specific integrated circuits that were capable of validating the S-crypt elliptic curve cryptography associated with Litecoin, as there were SHA-256 with Bitcoin. So that's a lot of stuff to say, though, that there's an energy cost associated with validating the network because you're trying to solve random math problems. But the random math problems get harder every 3 weeks or so. And with the more participants. So as Bitcoin is successful and more and more people go, yo, Satoshi, all right, bet. You got a cool idea. Let me download the software and run it too, right? And then we get application-specific integrated circuits. So now it's not just a couple of laptops. Now it's stacks of these dedicated hardware that does nothing but levy hash at the Bitcoin network. So what you start having is your average mom and pop, your average person can't participate to the same degree as a Marathon Digital, a Clean Spark, a Riot. So when we talk about how does Bitcoin get attacked, How does your Satoshis get under threat? It's Sailor and centralized supply folks can F with the spot price. They can make the value of it fluctuate with manipulation. But your ability to custody that asset, they can't do a damn thing. That's the validator set. That's what we want globally. Because if you say, whether you're in Austin, Texas, or Singapore, or China, or Russia, or Brazil, or anywhere, Point Nemo on a yacht, if you say I and you custody your keys and you want to spend an unspent transaction output on Bitcoin, the people that are validating your right to do that are all over the world, baby. That's why it's unstoppably free, guys. That's why not all blockchains are the same, guys. You got to look at that. What is the validator set? How distributed it is, right? That's why with Solana being 600 terabytes now, think about the cost of, do you in your home have 600 terabytes? You don't. The average person, out there doesn't have 600 terabytes. It's very expensive. And so, and that's how big the Solana ledger is. Whereas Bitcoin's still one. Litecoin is 100 gigabytes. Cardano is around 500 gigabytes. So you can distribute these ledgers. Now, going back to that energetic efficiency, right? So now that we appreciate the distribution of the hardware, we understand that as we levy hash power, the difficulty goes up, which makes these larger institutional level players have a bigger say in the validation of the network. That's why it was something to note that it was about 6 to 8 months ago, one entity on the Bitcoin ledger mined, I think it was 7 blocks consecutively, which means one entity was able to solve the math, random math, before anyone else. And then they were that's really that's the thing to get your eye on. The fact that they didn't try to cheat the ledger is like good, but that's not as concerning as the ability to win the hash war. And because what that means is you're that player, because probabilistically, okay, see, that's why the random math problem is Satoshi used the probability, the likelihood. It's a way through a game theoretical lens to be anti-adversarial. It's a way to, again, avoid the bad guy that's trying to say, if I want to corrupt the ledger, I need to enter the protocol. I need to participate in the protocol enough to have a shot at saying, this is what the block says, and reassign maybe the UTXOs, right? Step one, I need to break my way in, right? And the only way to do that is I've got to levy enough hash where I win the right to try. So that's step one, and so just, landing the plane on this, you had a large institutional player that was allowed to, that won. If you can levy enough hash rate and you can begin corrupting the ledger, right? Now, this is the power of mathematical determinism and formalism and waiting throughout time. If you have a UTXO associated with an address that has been validated every 10 to 15 minutes for the last 15 plus years, that's the longest chain. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's freedom maximizing. Folks that do not appreciate, and again, we need better quality of Bitcoin conversation, right? So again, now that we understand that there are reasons why validating the Bitcoin ledger could become very, very expensive and result in the centralization of the validator set. Now, understand that under the hood, what was going on when couple months ago, there's this whole core versus knots debate. There are people that want to censor what you can do, what is valid for inclusion in a block. And there are other people that are saying it's open source code, bro. Just let it be. You know what I mean? Like, here there be dragons everywhere. In free markets, that's part shadow and light of the world. Yin and yang, and may we celebrate and lean into the better angels of our nature and follow golden threads and make of yourself a light and love thy neighbor and all that good shit, but at the end of the day, if we're trying to build a blockchain, doing things that reduce the ability for people to participate and for there to be economic forcing functions, and then there's just censorship, the freedom and liberty, right? The First Amendment in me says, get out of here with your BS, bro. Yeah, there can be reprehensible material that is recorded on these public blockchains. That's basically their argument. And they want to, the auspice is, we want to stop that. but the people that are levying this are the same people that have a conniption if you mention XRP or a different blockchain. And again, when they can be more prepared to say, why will Bitcoin survive? Why can Bitcoin's ledger be circumnavigate the energy argument? And the TLDR is it can live and be validated concurrently on the Cardano ledger. And the beauty, the efficiency of the UTXO set, the weight of its ledger, data wise, the 1 terabyte means that's really not a big ask to have every Cardano SPO just go, hey, will you also include a copy of the Bitcoin ledger? And they go, okay, yeah, So now, when we talk about Nakamoto coefficient, right? That's the distribution of the validator set. So on the Bitcoin side, it's those people that are levying hash rate. On the Cardano side, it's stake pool operators. Now, instead of proof of work, where you're still doing something akin to solving a random math problem, but what will weight your probability of participation is stake based. So there are 45 billion ADA. Depending on how much stake you have, how many units you have, it will determine the probability of a given stake pool participating in the validation. So this is where shrewd and prudent game theoretical distribution is essential for this to be provably secure, so that people don't collude. You know what I mean? So there are trade-offs. But if you can achieve that escape velocity, which Cardano has, provably the Nakamoto coefficient. So this is the thing. You do not have a similar situation in which the single entity is participating in the validation of the block 7 consecutive. I'm sure there's been moments, certainly in Cardano's history, where a single entity validates, a block multiple times. In this case, it would be these stake pools. But think about this. 30,000 times as energetically efficient. To run up a Bitcoin node, you couple of laptops, off the shelf hardware. That efficiency, that reduction in the barrier to participation on the hardware side and the energy input side is profound. So now suddenly you got a way more lightweight hardware set. And think about that as well. If you had to strip down operations and bring them up again, I think about aggressions in Ukraine, right? What if you were there on the border and suddenly you're like, bro, I got babies and a wife and kids, I got to get out of here, and I happen to run Bitcoin mining hardware. Imagine what it would take for you to, you might not be able to spin down those operations depending on how big they are, right? Whereas a Cardano SPO, again, it's a couple of laptop situation, so you could literally bring down your hardware, move 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, wherever you're getting to feel safe, and then boom, you spin up your hardware, you spin up whatever. And then again, when we talk about the lightweight nature of the ledger too, you can send the entire history of the blockchain 500 gigabytes, relative to 600 terabytes and growing rapidly with Solana, So laying the plane, shout out to Bitcoin and Better Conversations. And just shout out also Cardano and interoperability, and so these are the things like Bitcoin. In order for us to have Bitcoin succeed, get adoption, and literally its price performance as an asset, knowing that energy security is not an issue removes an overhead. It removes a threat to the network. So Cardano as a proof of stake network that with Minotaur multi-resource consensus. So let's complete the little walk down the lane that we were going there. A Cardano SPO for 1 terabyte of hard drive, space, can store a copy of the Bitcoin ledger. And then with the implementation of Minotaur multi-resource consensus and the inclusion of the Cardano SPO set into the valid validator set, how I would do it if I was going to look at doing it. Shout out to, it's funny too, because this goes to the core versus not debates. There's a gentleman, I blanket on his name, doesn't matter. You can look him up. Mining Protocol, or rather the Ocean Protocol. Ocean Protocol. Ocean Protocol, when we're talking about on the Bitcoin side, is a way in which smaller people that are like Axe Miner, where they're like a single, there's this, you're just the little hash rate that could. With the ocean pool, you can get a bunch of participants all around the world to basically pool their hash rate. So, because your odds of participating in a block, ergo receiving a reward for your efforts, if you're running very, very modest, if you are of the laptop class, and they are out there. It's these days though, they're typically like Lightning Network node operators, but a lot of the people that run Lightning nodes also run like I think Bitmain or Bitminer, Axminer. There's different projects where there's actually some really cool new ones. Jack Dorsey is doing some really great work. I think he's been looking at some anyway. Plug and play validation, participation in the validation of Bitcoin, and the Ocean protocol allows the pooling of this such that you can together act as a single entity. So now you're competing with like a Marathon Digital, a Clean Spark, these big entities. So that's very cool. And that was breakthrough. That was literally because that was a very valid argument when you start looking at the game theoretical incentives that could centralize the validator set for Bitcoin. When you look at oil interests, and I think that in some senses is a healthy thing in one way. Is like I think as nuclear energy technology goes, and we see some displacements in how oil maintains some of its valuation paradigm. Again, I think we need to move into renewable energy resources and just have these folks that are managing these portfolios get commensurate participation. I love. There's a quote came up the other day from a gentleman from the Middle East. He was, I think, from a royal family, very, very wealthy. But he said that the age of oil will end not for want of oil. And that is so powerful, and that is him saying, I see technology advancing. We know there are alternative means of producing energy. Now there's some things that are very hard to replace, fossil fuels and carbon, all this, yeah, but we can do better. We can be more efficient. And so something like Bitcoin actually does offer a compelling value proposition for legacy exposure and assets to energy interests because it gives them, I mean, first of all, just peaker plant technology. So for folks that don't know, and especially like summers, like in like Phoenix, Arizona, and Texas, and all kinds of places, bro, where if you did not have AC, people would die. It's called like the wet bulb temperature and stuff. Like there's wet and dry bulb, doesn't matter. Point is, like they're saying, like, could you imagine being like an 82-year-old at a hospital in Phoenix, Arizona, and then boom, middle of summer, and there's a power out, and it's 123 degrees outside, and you're hooked up to medical apparatus that is right running on energy. How much backup power does that hospital have? How long can it run that AC? Do you feel me? So like we need to make sure that we have redundant energy technologies. This is where shout out to Tesla. Batteries, energy storage is such a powerful thing. And then production, photovoltaics, man, solar panels. But then again, Westinghouse, modular nuclear energy technology, as well as larger scale, utility scale. I think that projects like that would be exceptional for the United States. I think we should probably have because one, it's a lot of jobs, and for things like in a Phoenix situation, we cannot have the power go out in these days because it is getting hotter, guys, and it's already to a point where right no one wants to lose their AC in the summer in some of these places, and so that's another thing. This gentleman from a region where again, like, could you imagine the United Arab Emirates and whatnot, places over there, man, places in India where the asphalt melts? Could you imagine it getting so hot that the street stops being like a solid? That is that is insane. You know what I mean? So yeah, so energy, it all matters, and we got to be smart. And Bitcoin works on many levels, but that energy argument. So to land the plane on that, people say Bitcoin will fail because it's security budget, which is they're saying if it costs $250,000 to validate a Bitcoin block, and you get a quarter of a Bitcoin as a reward, how are people going to pay their energy bill? Ergo, Bitcoin will fail. If you're not a fool and limiting the conversations you have, you go, aha, Cardano has a higher Nakamoto coefficient, which means the validator set is actually, there is a greater distribution globally, decentralization and distribution of the ledger and the validator set of the Cardano SPO network relative to the Bitcoin network. I mean, the Nakamoto coefficient, which is a metric that measures this, how distributed, right? So of a given period in time, how many unique parties participate in the validation of the network, right? And you could ascribe a number to that, right? If the number is 32, if and then another one is 64, right? If 32 ends up being a baseline, you get the Nakamoto coefficient of 1, and then a 64 would be double that. And so if it's like, oh yeah, 32 people in any given 24-hour period, or entities, and these are random numbers, by the way, but to explain, right? And then you have one that does 64, or so on and so forth, where 300, and you will have a higher Nakamoto coefficient associated therewith. And so Cardano has a higher Nakamoto coefficient than Bitcoin, and Ethereum and Solana and these things. But yeah, so when the Cardano SPOs can include a copy of the ledger, and there's already provable code where through something like an ocean mining protocol is how I would approach it, or at least I would look at that. I think that there's you could probably go even a more elegant solution. You could yeah. Anyway, doesn't matter. But the point is, Cardano, for almost no overhead, can go, I'm your Huckleberry, and then they start validating, and that's more than 30,000 times as energetically efficient. So now suddenly, yeah, Bitcoin is still cooking. And so even if the energy thing, Bitcoin's still cooking. That chain is still being validated. It's just now being validated on a different hardware set. But why would but if you're a Cardano validator, why? And you could make money with Bitcoin and Litecoin and Cardano, and you know what I'm saying? And Monero and Zcash, because that is the value proposition of Cardano. Okay, because for folks that don't know, Cardano chose to take the UTXO-based model of Bitcoin and build smart contract expressiveness. That's very hard. The way that Ethereum got it done is they said, F that, let's not do that. It's hard. So they said, let's do Ethereum virtual machines and accounts-based models. Because think about this, with an accounts-based model, I can go, Ted, you're worth 1 million units. Sally, you're worth 500,000. Go. And they say, why? And you say, because I said so. I declared a universal variable called Timmy, and I said it's worth 1 million. Go. Right? So now it's, all right, bet. I can start writing smart contracts. Whereas with UTXOs, unspent outputs, if it's like, oh, Timmy's, account has $1 million units, and it's accounted for in UTXOs, right? You say, well, how do they get there, right? Well, let's look at the blockchain. UTXO stands for unspent transaction output. So it doesn't just pop into existence as a state in an account. Now shout out to HBAR and all kinds of, there's a lot of really, really cool work being done on state-based blockchains. Man, it really is very, very cool. So like, to geek out on that for a moment, imagine that all of the activity that happens on a blockchain, like say HBAR, in the last block, some unit time that is associated with an instance of the ledger. You could actually take that assignment, and once they do a thing gossiping. It's very, very interesting, the model. But basically, you can take the mathematics and the arrangement of those UTXOs that are existing on that ledger, for instance, or the state of the addresses on that ledger, which is one way, because you could break the UTXO thing. There's a whole, it's a lot, but I like the math. Basically, using that novel arrangement of the addresses and the associated balances, you can then derive a novel piece of encryption such that that key can only become a state. And by shout out to AB listening from a taxi. I hope you're venturing well. Happy Friday, AB. SpaceX guy. I mean, if you haven't heard, SpaceX is launching. We're hearing peace efforts are moving forward in Iran. Peace upon the people of the world, man. And the markets are cooking. So I'm going to give a quick market update for our boy AB. Bitcoin's at 63,786, up 0.5% on the 24. Litecoin's up 0.81%, 42.98, just about to break to the 43. Ethereum is down, but really it's only down 0.81%, 1669. Solana up 0.62% at 67.30. We got XRP down, but only 0.42 at $1.13. and let's land the plane on Solana, or rather Cardano. Cardano was up 1.31%, 17 cents, 0.1716. So yeah, man, markets are cooking, feeling good, you know. And for folks that don't know, I mean, if we got to put our tinfoil hats on, and I wish the world wasn't moved by money and whatnot as much as it is, but you know, spoiler alert, it is, right? Lizard people in the suits are real. Like, I mean, we're learning a lot of terrifying things out there, you know, with these, yeah. Um, all of which is to say, though, if you know you've got a major celebration that's going to happen, well, celebration, it's this event, this Freedom 250 with the UFC, live from the White House lawn on Sunday, I guess, which is weird because usually UFC holds their events on Saturday, but I'm not gonna whatever. So there's a lot of positive mojo happening domestically in America. We got the SpaceX IPO, so a lot of things seem well aligned in the markets. Again, I am not. What I'm looking for like a bullish reversal in the macro in the markets. I want to see peace in Iran and just generally. I really want to see peace in the Ukraine as well, bro. And I think that these things are linked. I think that a lot of the oil related and there's a lot of power and money. Talk about this Bitcoin situation as well. So I think a lot of these peace paradigms in Iran and Ukraine and in Israel and all this Palestine, I think a lot of it's interconnected. And I think that creates a perfect storm for these markets. Markets do not like uncertainty. They also don't like war. You know, when any given day something could be blowing up, you know, and when people are blowing things up, whatever side that's on, you're creating an unstable and a less safe environment. Whereas when peace is out there, it's like, okay, cool. Da, 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 da. So, I mean, there's that. And then Clarity Act. I think that's the 1-2 that I'm really looking for. That I think then I'm not going to be the one that's surprised to see Bitcoin charging back up to $100,000. I really believe we could have like a Santa Claus rally for real, for real. You know, we were deprived of a lot of shit last, man, October 10th, guys. October 10th, bro. That was a coordinated liquidity extraction event by the powers that be globally. But man, it started in the United States with a president and his wife, meme coin on Solana. They used Solana to get it too. And then a president down in South America somewhere did his little whatever the hell, you know, which then created a permissive environment for vape cabals and just fools doing dumb shit. And then they tossed it over to China, bro, and the monolithic Oracle wipeout. Guys, so imagine you've got assets committed to a platform and you're borrowing against those assets. Here's what's really effed up. If those smart contracts and those collateralized values are right, what is saying that your Bitcoin is worth 62,000, right? 60, like right, or 63,700. This is where an oracle comes in. An oracle, right, will go, hey, let me look at the market. I'm going to look at, you know, multiple indices where it's trading. I'm going to look at like Coinbase and Binance and all kinds of shit. My brain was also thinking like SpaceX. Shout out to Strike Perpetuals, live on Cardano. They've got SpaceX exposure, which is crazy, dude. I thought that they would get there, like because they went live with Nvidia a couple days ago, which I was like, oh, bro, well done, Shan. You know, he's Shan and the team at Strike Perps. But yeah, man, so many thoughts. Yeah, where was I going there? I mean, because there's so many, right? So many threads. SpaceX, Bitcoin, the validator set. It's stronger with Cardano, Minotaur multi-resource consensus. That's super dope. So Bitcoin's going to be fine. Strike perpetuals, artificial intelligence. All right, I'll go to this. The Cardano SPOs, the value proposition of concurrently validating multiple blockchains. So shout out to the Bifrost Bridge of Fluid tokens, right? So for folks who don't know, Bitcoin DeFi, that's another whole thing that's being radically underpriced into what Bitcoin is, right? Right now, dude, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Shout out to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Like Bitcoin is becoming involved in the apparatus in the United States. Like Bank of America and Fidelity have given all of their associates the green light to actually advise exposure to Bitcoin now. That is huge. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac now use Bitcoin as collateral or assets to back home loans. You've got more than 7 states in the United States have strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation passed. Texas has not only passed legislation, but has acquired Bitcoin in their state treasury. There are more than 14 other states with active legislation, and we still have the strategic Bitcoin reserve of the United States, which is, I still believe, guys, when we talk about why does Bitcoin hit $100,000 before Christmas? Bet. Peace in Iran, okay? Clarity Act, laws and lawyers' right, and international trade, Bitcoin preferred. When I tell you, imagine we get the Strait of Hormuz open. Imagine we get oil cooking, right? Remember all the tariff stuff? And it would be like, oh, we're going to threaten you with tariffs. You're going to get a tariff. You're going to get a tariff. And then they go, it's going to be a 90%. And they'd be like, nah, it's 20%. Get this. What if it was an auspice to begin conversations in a failing fiat system, knowing full well that in 6 months, once I get on the phone, I'm like, hey, yo, Pablo, my friend in Argentina, let's say, right? Tariff, da 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 da. But now I got, right, we're having a conversation. But then, bro, you say, how about this? You want to not be encumbered with the tariff situation? Let's do business in Bitcoin, right? So think about that. That is coming. Oil trade with Bitcoin preferred. And it'll be oil, it'll be iron, it'll be wheat, it'll be corn, it'll be rice, it'll be water. That paradigm is radically different. And that's the kind of stuff that we see in a post-Clarity Act paradigm, where suddenly these large entities and whatnot can actually begin doing business denominated. And then why would they do that? Well, again, as we've covered, when you know that the dollar is going to have this crazy inflation, we're going to clear 40 trillion in the US national debt before the end of the year, and we're growing at a rate of more than 1 trillion every 100 days. So there's an auspice, there's a reason why a strategic Bitcoin reserve, in international trade in Bitcoin, it allows America to begin transitioning and having a dual system of sort of, settlements and unit of account, because that's the beautiful thing, right? A currency. I often joke that there's something about the definition of a currency, the 3 fundamental qualities of a currency, that I love almost as much as Bitcoin. And it's that there is no aspect of the 3 fundamental qualities that define a currency that imply the necessity for the existence of a nation state issuer or a centralized issuer entity or a bank. Okay, all you need to have a currency is, and the first one's the hardest. 1, a mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. 2, a store of value. And 3, a unit of account. If you have those 3 things, you have a currency. And when you think about blockchain technology and the internet now, so like technology now got to the point where you can introduce an asset that anyone around the world can mutually agree that there's value there, right? Because that's gold. Right? Gold just being gold, a dollar being a dollar, right? So that is a powerful piece of learning. That is another thing that, when people have these conversations about like, what is Bitcoin? Where is the value? What is the economic, hypothesis or thesis that would drive adoption at the nation state and international trade level? And it's these things. We know that the dollar will be encumbered by inflationary forces. There is going to be a lot more dollars in circulation in 5 years, 10 years than there is now. Substantially more so. Guys, in 10 years, how many 100-day units is in 10 years, right? A lot, like 30, you know what I mean? So are we looking at 30 trillion? But hey, I'm not the guy that's going to tell you, shit, that actually kind of tracks. But again, hockey stick, guys, it actually might be lowball on that time frame, because that would imply a $70 trillion national debt in 30 years. Could you imagine? And that's just at the present rate, So by 2056, 70 trillion. And that's just if we keep going and actually, that's on the conservative side. We're going faster than that. So when you look at that, right? And that's 10. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was 10 years. 2036. Jesus. Could you imagine Could you imagine the national debt at 70 trillion in 2036? I'm not the guy that's going to tell you that that's impossible. You know, we are printing $1 trillion every 100 days. And we were doing that before we started messing around in Iran. And then whatever the hell is going to be shaken out in Ukraine, you know? So, yeah, you know, man. And what's really wild is the gross domestic product of the United States is unable to service the interest on that debt. That is why it is so, when we talk about like a hockey stick and exponential curve, is because then if you aren't growing, if you aren't adding value to what the dollar is by SpaceX and innovation and new things, the only way to satisfy obligations is you just print the units. If value isn't being added with goods and services and all this, but people are still saying, hey, right, I'm China, you said you'd give us this or that or the other. Well, so it's for these reasons why Bitcoin is inevitable. It's one of the reasons why it's inevitable, because it is the only asset that exists that will allow America to maintain its current position of dominance in the international trade conversation. And where we've had that is a powerful consumer economy historically, although now the rent's too damn high. No one's having babies. No one, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's not. Yeah, but traditionally, yeah, historically, America has been a very, very strong consumer economy, and international trade was denominated in the dollar. But then, as we're going to have to print a lot of dollars, and so dollars are going to lose a lot of value. Like, what is the incentive for a foreign country to purchase our debt? Which is important. So we say, oh, we'll give you, you're Argentina or you're some nation, right? And you want exposure to the growth paradigm of America and the security of the international unit of account, the US dollar and all this. So it's like, yeah, you buy some of our debt, some of our treasuries, some of our bonds, and we'll give you some percentage based on that, but in dollars, right? And if that's okay, 5% return, which is pretty aggressive actually, depending on what you're getting into. But then when that 5% is no longer keeping up with how aggressively we have to print, well, now there's literally not an economic incentive other than here's what's sad. And this is why the Genius Act, stablecoin legislation, we want to advantage that, because I'll tell you this, it is you could phrase it many ways, right? But it is, in some senses, it's a speculative arbitrage on the fiat regime globally, because the only incentive that you would have for getting the dollar, relative to your local currency, is because your local currency is doing even worse. So could you imagine a state in which the dollar is radically and rapidly like unraveling, as far as its like surety as a basis for international trade? And then, because historically a lot of these different nations do have exposure to dollar denominated debt on their balance sheets, and if their pyramid is of their currencies is based on the soundness of the dollar, and so then you get a bit of a multiplier effect, that becomes possible in the influence on the value of the real, what's Italy's currency. But doesn't matter. But Italy historically, shout out to Italy, but they have money issues all the time. So that is not a good thing, though, right? If the only reason people are buying US dollar denominated debt and treasuries is because their houses are burning down, that is like, one, it's actually not a freedom maximizing solution, right? Why? Bitcoin exists, bro. Litecoin exists, bro. The 45 billion ADA exists. Monero and Zcash exist. Bitcoin Cash exists. XRP exists. There are options, that have hard cap supplies. You can escape infinite fiat inflation. Now, again, note, Ethereum has no supply limit. Solana has no supply limit. Those are other reasons why I don't really choose to hold them, but I've got friends that are building there, and I very much do wish them well, but my thesis is, right? By having those open conversations, and they go, oh shit, bet. All right, there are some trade-offs here. Like, so if my enterprise is fruitful, that is its own argument potentially to persist, but it would maybe do me well to also, see to it that I avail myself of the greater security and liberty of UTXO based assets with hard cap supplies and global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanisms and the publicly distributed ledgers associated therewith, right? Because then you get freedom. So that's great. By the way, those three things are what define a sovereign digital asset. There's few of them. I would say Bitcoin and Litecoin, yes. Cardano, yes. Beyond that, you could kind of grandfather in Midnight, because similarly to like what we were talking about, where what happens when every Cardano SPO just includes a copy of the Bitcoin ledger, but then the Litecoin, the Zcash, the Monero, then suddenly they can be a valid participant in the validation mechanisms for all of these networks. And then even if they don't want to participate in the direct validation, they can offer decentralized financial resources and contracts, and also on ramps and off ramps for like the Monero set. So there's so many things, and by integrating copies of those ledgers within the validator set of Cardano, you can operate your DeFi environment with a higher degree of surety, because you have direct like witness. You don't even need oracles to tell you like what's the state of these things. Oh yeah, back to oracles. That's where I was. October 10th, the liquidation event, the coordinated liquidation event that was targeting decentralized finance in particular. It was October 10th of last year, 2025. And there's a reason why. And then Bitcoin got cheap. They didn't want us to be able to bid, right? So Bitcoin was, it was bad, man. But it was monolithic. The word is, right? And do your own research and whatnot. And it's all art and stories. But monolithic oracles, guys, is that, imagine you've got collateralized. That's where I was going with that. That's saying, hey, your assets are collateralized at a $63,000 valuation for Bitcoin, right? And let's say you're liquidated at 50,000. Let's say, the monolithic oracle issue is, what happens if the data feed that's telling your smart contract that loans are basically healthy or not, collateralized positions are liquidatable or not, if there's a monolithic oracle, meaning that you have one source of truth, when you don't have like a Cardano validator set, and the most oracle networks are multiple, and for a reason, is because you don't want to rely on any one source of truth. Because what happens, and this is the other issue, another security issue with the accounts-based model, and there's a lot there. When you can just zap, is because if that monolithic oracle for a second says 63, 63, 63, 50, 63, 60, even if that 50 was not actually real. And that's what's really fucked, is all you need is to start the snowball, right? Your anomaly on your monolithic oracle feed, if it zaps 12% of liquidity, bang, like that on like a Solana pair or whatnot, well, once they're liquidated, you get a cascading series of liquidations. Because in order to satisfy those liquidations, what that involves is whatever their positions that they're exposed to get automatically sold at the market to satisfy their loans. Well, the market was valuing those assets at some level, and people were actually borrowing, or to gain exposure. And like what they were borrowing to participate, it got at risk. So now you have to liquidate those assets at those levels. So that means people that were not even involved in that. Well, now the market takes a hit, and then you start getting those people that get liquidated, or starts triggering stop losses and whatnot. And then the market crumbles and melts, And so that is more or less, what happened on October 10th is a monolithic oracle, and, And the bummer about an account, right? Ledger goes out. Ledger comes up. Right? You don't have an unbroken series of unspent transaction outputs where you can go, Tom's account was 859,000, and then it was With an account, it's Tom. Tom's account is this. What was it yesterday? I don't know. Right? This is his account now. Right? The ledger is 600 terabytes. We have to prune it. Right? So why are you asking questions? You know what I mean? These are real concerns with Solana. Right? Because not only do you have that, what do you mean accounts-based problem where you don't have math building, an unbroken history that says this is why you own what you own, and the discrete nature of it all this really cool shit that allows you to truly own it and be able to express it unstoppably. With an account, you just don't have that, and so not only do you have that account vulnerability, because that chain blow, the 600 terabyte ledger, and then all the Solana, the stake you need, it's crazy, how capitalized you have to be. Whereas to participate in the validation of the Cardano blockchain, you need less than $2,500 and marketing ability, because you don't even need stake. You just have a stake pool. You're just running the hardware. You can do that again with a couple of laptops. That's 20, and the energy's pretty cheap. And then you just go, hi, this is my stake pool. Delegate to me, and then people that have ADA that want to make it productive delegate to your hardware, which makes your hardware more likely to produce a block and participate in the validation and all this cool shit. But yeah, with Solana, it's not that way. It's like, dude, first you need 600 terabytes. You go, what? It's like you need $250,000 of hardware to start this conversation, huh? And then they're like, all right, and then you're going to need about another $250,000 in stake and SOL to probabilistically participate in the validation of the ledger. And you go, bro, ain't nobody got no $500,000, $1.1 million to, play your little Solana game, which is why the validator set is shrinking, because it's expensive to participate. And unless you're subsidized and someone's saying, okay, well, I'll pay for your hardware and then I'll delegate, so I'll make sure that you have Solana going to you, right? People go, yeah, bro, I'm done. I can't, it's not feasible for me, and they fold, because also when your chain is radically growing, again, remember, Bitcoin's at 1 terabyte and it's been going for 15 years. Solana's at 600 plus and it's been going for 7-8 years, so it's 600 times larger and it's growing faster as there's adoption. So if you are one of these validators, suddenly you're like, bro, I need like a second garage, you know what I mean? Like to hold all my hard drives now, just because we're getting this chain bloat situation. So when we understand what these things are, right? Now, why do more people F with Solana? Because VC spent money. They did marketing, guys. Looking at you, Cardano, and it was effective, but it doesn't mean that it's a freedom technology. It doesn't, right? It's got an unlimited supply and an account as chain bloat. Nah, right? It's really stupid. And the trenches, the community cannibalism, the PvP, like it was not good. And a lot of people now, that is what they think that blockchains are. And that's not at all. It's freedom. It's ways in which you can literally exponentiate your value. You can make your Bitcoin productive. You can make your Litecoin productive. If you understand things like memes, things like distributed data storage and compute, right? Maybe more utility-based plays. Things like Strike, bro. Shout out to Strike. When we're speaking of like these different platforms, like Hyperliquid and Aster and Strike, all of them are basically the same kind of thing, just on a different tech stack. But that's powerful. So you've got these platforms like Strike, where right now, today, you can get exposure to the SpaceX IPO, which is crazy, on Cardano. And get this, you can make money on that market. And you can, I think, they've got Bitcoin Live, I believe. They've got, of course, they have ADA and Night. They've got, I think, Ethereum Live. So people are using these platforms to do leverage, right? They want to go 5x, 10x on these different positions, right? Well, what if you're like, bro, I'm going to leave that to you, but if you're going to do it and I can make money on you doing it, so I can help you do what you're going to do and I can make money on that. How would I do that? I would add liquidity. It's one way, right? And then another way is I can purchase these Strike tokens, right? And so Strike, associated with their platform, actually has a hard cap supply asset called Strike. And what you can do is you buy Strike tokens and you stake them to the platform. Okay. Now the platform goes, oh shit, we have our token, our asset that we are also helping grow in value. And they're not spending it. So the spot price is also, right? The spot price is determined by the last buy and sell order. If there's a hard cap supply on the number of these Strike tokens, and we've got a bunch of them staked to our platform, right? Now, why would they do that? Because they get a cut of the platform fees. So as people are going to SpaceX and Bitcoin and all the other shit, right? Boom, guys, DeFi, right? Now, so imagine getting that cooking on Monero and Zcash, not on Monero, but allowing them to access Strike perpetuals via Midnight or via Cardano, you know, Bitcoin, you know, and then with a Strike token would be one way where you can passively gain exposure to DeFi revenue without taking the risk of assuming those positions yourself. You know, you're not going to generate maybe as much, right? You're not going to get the 1000x return or whatever, or 1000% return even. But 23%. Like I think last I checked, they like tweeted something. I think they were at like 22% return for just staking the Strike token. So I mean, it's exciting, guys. Which leads well into the Cardano Collective efforts, man. So shout out to the Cardano Collective. Man, Cash, dudes. Shout out to Cash. There's a guy, his name is Cash. He goes by Cash Anvil on Twitter. He owns, or he doesn't own, he's the head. He runs a called Anvil Development Agency, Anvil Dev Agency. And they my understanding is they help create author smart contracts and whatnot, of myriad kinds, but with an emphasis though on UTXO based smart contracts, and UTXO based smart contracts were innovated upon Cardano. Cardano literally, that's what they did. That was their, how can we get smart contract expressiveness on Bitcoin's UTXO model, and that's why what drew me to it, is I understood this is unlocking the expressiveness for the Bitcoin. You know what I mean? That's great. But yeah, man, he's one of those that was recently out there saying that he employs people, and he doesn't have a big team like a lot of these teams that are running on most of these blockchains, dude. A lot of them are not, unless you're a founding entity, then you might have 100 people making 400 grand with all expenses paid to a business that loses, that doesn't make any money. That's one of the problems that Aid is facing, which is why the Cardano Collective, quite frankly, because the powers that be in the Cardano ecosystem are just provably inept. I mean, it's just is what it is. I mean, you've got entities that have had billions of dollars worth of assets, and like things like the Strike situation, or things like stablecoin liquidity. That's another very simple kind of way to start getting yield. And so when we've had these giant, these entities that have had billions of dollars worth of assets that natively generate using the protocol additional revenue. That was another thing with these founding entities, is they were given like this endowment. Like it's like, all right, we're going to give you assets because you have a mission, right, to help Cardano do Cardano shit, And so these people were given like billions in some cases. Like I think IO input output, what they're known as today, were given something like around 2 billion. Cardano Foundation was given, I believe, like 650-ish million. But I think there was more. They also maybe had some Bitcoin in the mix. That's another IO has like 100,000. It was crazy. And then Emergo had like 2 billion Bitcoin as well. So it's like 3 founding entities. 2 got about 2 billion. 1 got about 650 million. But then there was some other special sauce. But with that, you generate yield every 5 days. So there's 45 billion ADA that will ever exist, which is why those staking rewards have diminished over time. But so the Bitcoin block reward halving, right? That's a step function situation every 4 years. Whereas Cardano, it's more an attenuation. It's like a diminuendo, where instead of just dropping off radically on one day over like every 4 years, cutting in half, it's just okay. For every, I did the math once where it was basically every 1,000 ADA that you were staking to a stake pool, generally speaking, would yield like 1 ADA every 5 days. You know what I mean? But like when it was first launched, it was like way more than that. Like let's say it would have been 4, just to pull a random number, but to illustrate what's happening. So like 5-6 years ago, let's say every 1,000 ADA would generate 4 ADA. Well, now it's down to 1, right? Now, but here's the thing. If over the last 5 years, you've been generating ADA every 5 days, well, then the amount of ADA you're staking, it's not just that, say, 2 billion anymore. It's 2.5 or 2.6, which generates more than 2 billion. So while the reward has been right, so there's a lot of dynamism in this. But when you have these founding entities, that passive revenue that they got with ADA rewards, one, that's sales pressure on the community. But that is revenue to keep yourself afloat. That's like $40+ million, 20, 40 million or more, depending on the price of ADA and whatnot. But so like that is how you get a young, scrappy team. If you had $40 million and you're not having to start a truck in the morning or cut down a tree or pull oil from the ground or grow a vegetable, or you know what I'm saying? Like you're just helping run infrastructure and you got $40 million coming in from the protocol and you mess that up. When I see every $1 million is 10 engineers, every $1 million is 10 good engineers, right? Meanwhile, the entities that we have are paying these engineers like 400 grand. They're not being young and scrappy like you're supposed to. When you're a startup, right? And so like speaking of like Cash, bro, like he's not out here balling out of all control. And yeah, I mean, he's gotten some like support from but that's what things are there for, right? But there are people in the ecosystem that have had inordinate support. It's to the point where it's like tone deaf, where you look at what they have and they got like 9 million USD equivalent in ADA, and they're the ones saying, "Oh, I think things are fine, guys. I think the way that things are going, I mean, they could be better, but it's fine, guys." Well, yeah, because it's fine has led you to have $9 million ready to flow your way, which is why you're shutting the F up and pretending things are fine. That's how we're in the problem that we're in, right? So not only have these founding entities had passive whatever, they're coming with their hand out. So all year, so when you look at the charts, when you look at like Bitcoin and Solana and Ethereum, like how did they do relative to ADA? Well, what they didn't have, now Solana actually had some gnarly unlocks and whatnot too, but like it's not that ADA hasn't had money. It's we've had ineptitude with way too much power and privilege. And so all of us have been eating the sales pressure to pay the salaries of these people that are really more fulfilling social needs more than they are actually delivering value on the blockchain. You know? And that is just what it is. You're right. And whereas solutions, right? And I've been saying this before. The thing that I would do is a crypto treasure quest to fund a wallet with 1 Bitcoin, 4 Litecoin, 2,143 ADA, and 1,143 Night. Less than 250 grand. And then to get that distributed to 24 small businesses that are crypto friendly, that want to get marketing for free, right? And be proof of, a point of sale. I mean, bro, there's so many things, right? But by having people get the 24 word seed phrases, that is way less than even the salary of some of these nameless people, and that would inspire millions of dollars of flow. I guarantee you. And that's the thing. We don't have that leadership from the top, and that's what we need. If we're paying you billions of dollars, damn it, someone better have some magic in them. So again, the other thing is like we need someone that does the Babe Ruth situation, that will take the mound, will point to the sky and say, "I'm gonna put that ball in the damn crack and hit a home run." Charles should have been saying, "Nah, bro, we're gonna get ADA to $1 by July 4th. We're gonna get SNEC to a penny by da 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 da." The rollout of Midnight, bro, was atrocious. How many folks know that there was a epoch rollover on Halloween night? Now, anyone that's been paying attention also knows, when did Satoshi release the white paper of Bitcoin? Halloween night, 2008. When was the Midnight Network supposed to launch? When you go back, and they even pushed the whatever. So Charles fumbled that. We should have launched Night at midnight on fucking Halloween, you idiot. That's literally that's why you pay some people a salary. That's why you pay someone, because they can articulate a way to do the same shit we're fucking gonna do, but that gets everyone really excited about it. Oh, and it's fun. Jesus. It's that kind of shit. So could you have imagined leading up to all October, 31 days of legend and lore? And because Charles needs someone apparently, doing whatever service, we could talk about, remember when Charles was doing like the squirrel or whatever the hell he did, like the meme on you know what I mean? But that could be a historical thing on October 3rd that we cover for that day. Do you understand how now we're cultivating community? We're celebrating shit. We're educating about the history of cryptography, and we're leading up to the epoch boundary rollover on Cardano. So people are also learning about that shit about Cardano. And then we're midnight, bitch. Halloween, celebrate Bitcoin, Satoshi, freedom, liberty. Yeah, Chuck fuck that up. Man, I'm sorry, bro. But I mean, again, I'm feeling for cash. I'm feeling for my boy Chicken, bro. I'm feeling for shout out to AB. I don't know what you say or you didn't know that. Maybe the Halloween night thing. I don't know. Maybe the epoch boundary rollover. But yeah, I mean, to fumble that, like how much fun that would have been, guys. I love Halloween. You know what I mean? I love the power of that imagining, bro. Just that the veil's thin, that people allow themselves to believe that the impossible becomes possible. And yeah, and so like that would have been such a more powerful beginning and origin story for Midnight, dude. Again, that's like $50 million in the market cap right there, literally. And think about the adoption that we could have got all October when you had people live streaming, right? Where it was like, hey, I'm here for 8 hours a day, and then I'm going to hand it off to my friend over in London. Yeah, yeah, amen. Yeah, the Halloween thing. I know, it's cool, huh? Yeah, Satoshi Nakamoto released the Bitcoin white paper on Halloween night, 2008. And the Genesis block was cooking not too long later, January, the next year, January 3rd-ish. And then yeah. Cardano also, if you look back, you can like Google like Cardano epoch calendar or whatever. Because I did this like last summer. I was thinking, here's how I would roll out. You know what I mean? And yeah, and you look, and it's like, oh shit, Cardano had had an epoch boundary rollover on Halloween night, which that's what, like, to do that midnight airdrop was basically, I think, was at an epoch boundary. You know what I mean? Because you boom, you get the initial airdrop of night. So it's just like just the marketing of that. It sells itself, and Bitcoin holders. And don't even get me started on him fumbling, like not having the Trezor support lined up, and then basically lying, saying 20% of night would go to people that had Bitcoin in self custody, and to basically have blacklisted a bunch of the default situations that people would have had, and then to roll over 10%, half of the Bitcoin allocation to the scavenger hunt, and then to know that like Cardano employees and cabal situation were running the bots. And the fact that the powers that be of the Midnight team were not only did they write a lot of the bots and whatnot, but they even said on the last day we'll kill the API so that people that with just laptops can actually have a shot. Because if anyone was trying to do it, like, because that's the other thing, right? Another way to celebrate the whole October thing is like Bitcoin was the laptop class, like you could do it on your laptop. And that was another thing that I would, I was like, bro, if we can get it to the point where everyone can generate 1,143 night, why 24 billion night will ever exist? Okay. The Bitcoin normalized unit, right? So just like how the BNU, the Bitcoin normalized unit of Litecoin is 84 million divided by 21 million. The BNU of Cardano is 2,142.8, but 2143. That's 45 billion divided by 21 million. For midnight, it's 11428, but 1143. So you take 24 billion, which I do like that for midnight because there's 24 hours in a day, all this kind of shit. So that's cool. 24 billion divided by 21 million is 1143. So if people could, at their laptops over the course of the 20 whatever day scavenger hunt, that ended up being like 40 or whatever, that should have led up to like Halloween night. But if the average laptop could have generated 1143 or something like that, that would have been so fucking cool. Thank you, AB. Thank you, bro. You know what they say? They say, I don't know, man. Shout out to the nun in the desert. Thank you, man. That's validating, and that's why. Because again, like, not to get into my own whatever, you need to learn to be your own best advocate. Which is why at the end of the day, bro, when I've won, I mean, anyway, like I'll show you how great I am. I know I have a talent. I know what I can do for Cardano. I mean, bro, you know what I mean? Like, you get a nice Discord cooking where people can actually have persistent conversation. We get a network of SPOs going, yo, bro, are you all right? Am I all right? We're good. How's your hardware going? How's my hardware going? Do you need help getting delegation right? Because a lot of these SPOs, maybe they can't communicate this way. Maybe they don't have this. But what if I knew, okay, bet I'm going to have every day I'm going to feature a different SPO. I'm going to give them a shout out, or maybe even every week. I'll give them a whole week, and I do 1 to 3 hours a day. And I may do an evening and a morning and an evening. I've been trying to do these closer to like my coffee. Today I waited even a little bit longer because the time period is different. You know what I mean? And so I want to be able to be live when different people are awake, and able to tap in with the stream. But yeah, this is like it's not like, and this goes for all the blockchains, but really, and the reason why I'm focusing a lot on Cardano right now is, one, the opportunity that Cardano presents in the broader market is like unparalleled, and no other blockchain is going through a moment like right now where ostensibly the community has an impact and is involved, and that's why it is a lot of people that are like the heart and the soul of this ecosystem are just tapping out, bro. And like when you look at all these midnight ambassadors, dude, it's sad. Like here's it's the reality. Man, they fuck so many things they messed up about that midnight airdrop. But a lot of the people that were participating in the bot farming and whatnot, it's a lot of those folks, man. It's people that ran Cardano infrastructure. And they knew it was going to crowd out, it would increase the difficulty so much that the average laptop class, you stop being able to solve the problems. And it was such a problem that they even published on their website that they'd shut off the API in the last 24 hours to give other people a chance. It's like, bro, isn't this whole thing supposed to be about if you didn't get, because bro, it's supposed to be like, right, if you had Bitcoin or AVAX or BNB, there was like 7 XRP that if you like, and actually it was 20% to Bitcoin, and it was like another like 18 or 16% split among these multiple chains. But basically the scavenger hunt was, you don't need to be rich. It was to me, the soul of it was to bring it back to like Bitcoin was. And again, that sells its fucking self, and the way to do that is you get it so that the people can actually participate. You didn't need to have Bitcoin. You didn't need to have AVAX or XRP or BNB. You just have to be here with us. Welcome to the Midnight Network, bro. Are you ready for freedom? Let's get it. Get yourself a laptop. Get yourself a lace wallet, right? And we start doing it together. But what happened? Privileged MFers within Cardano, many people on payroll, privy to Catalyst, helped cook that effing bot and all the SPOs and crowded out the new people. And then not including Cardano native assets in the night airdrop, bro. People that do the Cardano native assets, the things like SNEC and Iagon and Fluid tokens and CSwap and any of these are the people that are actually using the chain, right? Tax environments are different all around the fucking world, man. And yet, what did you do? You advantaged like the whales and whatnot, like the Japanese whales. And I get it, dude, taxes and whatnot, but right, you get a fat bag of ADA. You delegate it to a stake pool every 5 days. You know what I mean? Like, and so but instead of building new community, that is why the ADA is in the fucking trash. Because Chuck keeps effing up. And these founding entities, and he circled himself with people that he pays, and now he's got his hand out saying, give me another several $100 million and to keep blowing money, and it's bad, guys. It's so frustrating, so I get it. And now we're looking at people that have put their heart and their souls into this, that are wrapping it up. There's a guy who was on the timeline said, I am bankrupt. Chapter 7, bish, out of the game. We got another guy who's got his whole heart and soul, and he's just got laid off his job. And he should have an opportunity. There's another guy who also used to worked for a couple different projects on Cardano, but it's so hard that he got laid off too. And now we got folks like Cash going, bro, I can't do it anymore. And again, he has every right to be upset because he was doing it right. The scrappy MFers, dude, like if you've ever been part of something that you love, like that's the other thing that I think is really frustrating about where Cardano is. It's this privileged rich kid effing attitude out of Switzerland. Like you're really going to roll up here with your vest and your hat. You're really going to be like that. Like everything's fine for me. I bet, bro. Necessity is the mother of invention, and you have been entirely insulated from the necessity for having any kind of competence because the people of Cardano pay your bills. Man, and it's just tone deaf, dude. It's sad. It's sad. And we can do better. And that's what's also frustrating is it is not all lost. It is not good. It is not good because the people that are around the Night Force, a lot of them were on that scavenger hunt, and they're on the Night Force after they're being paid to fucking pretend after killing all of the hope and the light and the love. You know what I mean? It's like, well, let's throw some money at the people that exist because, dude, here's Charles keeps effing up like how he fumbled October and Halloween, bro. We could have owned, guys. We could have owned last year. Like, I mean, we October 10th was going to be right. Ooh, but think about that. Even with October 10th, we could have been that bright light because still, midnight was going to launch anyway. You know what I mean? Shit. And then, man, to roll that into November and then into December, because then, boom, you've got the first release of the night tokens now, and then, man, you start cooking about the utility that we're going to have in it, and we start building communities in a real way, not just the people that'll pretend that Chuck isn't effing up and Fred is okay and Emergo should be. You know what I mean? So it's a problem. It's a serious problem, but it's not incurable. Okay. So again, at that Discord, the two first things, I think getting the SPOs that run infrastructure, just get them together so that they can see each other. They have a place where they can communicate, and then DREPs. That's why if you go to that the Cardano Collective Discord, there's the general. That's where most of the shout out to the Sneck fam, right? You don't want too much diffusion of the conversation, but you also want to be able to have, because by unifying the at least the general mind frame of, okay, this conversation is going to be with SPO shit and then DREP shit. Those two things, if we can get the SPO network into the Discord and just knowing, hey, cool, like literally right now, just hi, I'm Tom, I run a SPO, right? And maybe I'm in Brazil or I'm in Argentina or I'm in Australia, whatever, you know what I mean? But then when they're there and they go, okay, cool, now we've got a Discord channel where the SPOs, and they're also on the general channel, right? Because here's what imagine we get 20 SPOs in there regularly in the first whatever, and they're going, oh yeah, da, 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 da. And what if we say, guys, for one, do you need help with delegation? Okay, here's how we're going to help that. We got a guy doing live content every day. He's going to start plugging, 1 week he'll do this one, next week that one, right? And we'll get those stake pools saturated. So now we got a network of SPOs that are starting to get support. They've got someone with a skill and a talent actually out here saying, hey, delegate to this, da 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 da. And then those 10 SPOs, what if they are all going, we're going to use our rewards and we're going to increase stablecoin liquidity, right? And so then we start having, wow, we're growing, our liquidity, or we're all going to get exposure to Strike because, we got Shan and the team over at Strike. They're doing great work. They're getting transactions happening on Cardano, and that's profitable. That is a way to begin exponentiating the value return of an SPO network. Use the ADA yield. You could compound it, right? Or you could switch it to Strike, which buoys the Strike price. So now ecosystem's winning. And now our network of SPOs are also now staking Strike, which has a greater yield, which allows them to begin acquiring ADA. Guys, we need to compete with founding entities to migrate supply of ADA. And right now at 17 cents, do you feel me? That's what we do with the SPOs and shit, bro, is we start making our infrastructure. We do what they're not doing. They're terrible business people because there is so much opportunity. It's just literally just inefficiencies. Cardano was made less. I'm kind and I say 10%. Cardano had 10% of the success that they could have had. We should have consolidated between $3 and $5. ADA right now should be like, maybe we could say even 2 and 5, but like we should have had a healthy regime where we had charged to 3 to 5, but we were entirely, because founding entities were selling hundreds of millions of dollars at IO, at who knows what Emergo's been doing, Cardano Foundation. And then not only has ADA had sales pressure, they have not been actually feeding the ecosystem. You know, it's just been sad. So when the Cardano SPOs, we get a network where now they help getting delegation. That's a win. So now you've got a network of SPOs that have delegation. Their yield is being more efficiently used to foster and grow the broader ecosystem. And then the other thing, D-reps, right? I mean, we just heard today. I think there's 2 D-reps now, and like Big Pay. Shout out to Big Pay, who's also, I guess, winding down all of his shit. Like he's tapping out. You know, I mean, yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot there, but yeah. So D-reps, right? Get them, all in a Discord channel. So where it's like, hey, look, here's a good idea, right? Or hey, here is a proposal that makes sense, and then having that place where that conversation can happen, and having a channel where people, if they really are like, yo, I would love support for this, and I can advocate for it. We can meet up. We can da da da. And with a live stream, with voice channels, with spaces, we can begin coordinating ways where people that are seeking support can have a cohort that they can go to, the D-reps of the Cardano collective. So those 2 things, just getting people in the room saying, hi, I'm Tommy, I'm a D-rep or I'm a SPO operator, would go a long way, because then, right, we can begin coordinating, acting with unity, and then we can exponentiate the value we create because we're force multipliers together. It's like why engineers work in teams and whatnot. But yeah. So those are 2 good, like, broad based things, like whereas the ecosystem is doing things, and even Charles is, again, man, he's always jacking ideas from the community and then fumbling them. Like, I can't even tell you, bro. It's crazy. Like, they buy projects or they don't support them, and then they try to do them and then they fail. It's bad, dude. They just gotta stop doing that. Just stop, dude. Ugh, man. But yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So where I was going with that, though, is we can do it a lot better. And so in the context of, with all that's going on, I think saying, hey, look, here's a Discord, right? And one, it's like, just generally, there is a plan. Like, at least there are people that are willing to say, I have a high degree of certainty that if we do this, this, and this will occur. Furthermore, I will put a fucking number on what I think we can get. And again, had we launched this shit at the end of last summer, walked through October and through Christmas, I would have had this bitch at a $1 by July, by next month. And here's the other thing. The people that you want leading it are the ones that know, just by setting the goal, we do better. Just by setting the goal. Even if I failed. And here's another thing. I said I would quit. I would resign from trying to be whatever. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And then you have Charles, I have no control, and I'm spending all the fucking money and not supporting people that are trying to, foster dreams. Fucking bitch work, dude. Bitch work. Ugh. It's just disappointing, dude. Because again, this is life and death for people. It's how they're feeding their families, dude. But we got MFers in vests and hats talking about, or other people, I'm lost on the train in the fucking $9 million. Shit. It's disgusting, dude. So yeah, it's not like, oh, there's a ragtag group that hopes. No, there are things we can do. And that's also why Charles and the powers that be, there's divide and conquer. There's pay people to pretend it's okay, but yeah, he knows that's one of the reasons why, because we actually can do better, and it's funny because he likes to be, I'm not the face, I don't want to be responsible, I'm going to go away, but then he does everything in his power to make it so that he is the only face, and then everyone else that is paid. Do you think it's a coincidence that in that latest midnight network, whatever, right, Linda was there and Pete was there and some angry crypto folks were there and someone in Design Time who was a Cardano whatever, and then was like, oh, they didn't pay me enough, and then stopped, and then, oh, but now she's back for midnight, because they're tapping the same Rolodex, dude. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And so don't let these people say, I'm not paid. Bish. You know what I mean? these folks are, or they're in the group chats. That's the other thing on the Cardano cabal is when a strike launches, when like a butane, not even unraveling that. But if you look at the shapes of these charts too, the same advantaged players, right? Whether they were getting the catalyst funding or not, they know about, oh yeah, this token's launching. So the same people are also winning on all the Cardano native assets as well. It's just so bad. And then when you talk about like even the infrastructure, the DEX aggregators and the DEXs, I mean, dude, you know? So it would not take a lot to radically improve how Cardano's doing. But that's also why people are really upset because it's understandable. The ineptitude is profound. And the number of like, it's just bad and it's got to stop, And I think one of the powerful things is Midnight will not succeed with the Cardano community being as, just disrespected as they have been, by these folks. Like, you can't just, and then, it's the same folks that are going to mess up your money again, man, it's wild, And so that's why it's like, it's the time to do better now because we can. And the way in which to make Midnight maximally succeed and Cardano is it's a coordinated strategy because they are stronger together, and it's this kind of shit that just like Charles and whoever the hell he's got on him totally fumbled what could have happened leading up to, in October for the Midnight Network. I mean, even the name, dude. That's Halloween at night, fall season. Jesus. Could have been so fun. Stupid. But yeah, so we get SPOs united, we get DREPs united, okay? And then Crypto Treasure Quest. We could launch that for less than $500,000 and get everybody, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, anyone that wants to win a Bitcoin and more is going to be interested. What do they have to do? So here's the thing, right? You'd want them to basically feel like they're Indiana Jones or Robert Langdon in the Da Vinci Code, where they go to a website, right? The Crypto Treasure Hub, right? And they solve riddles, okay? And they solve 2 or 3 riddles, and some of those riddles, again, will be like celebrating history. It might ask about, the third sentence in Hal Finney's master thesis. And they may not go, oh, who's Hal Finney, right? But they'll maybe learn on this quest, and then they enter it in at the website. And then after the 2 or 3 questions, they get an address. And then, oh my gosh, this is a bakery. It's a donut shop in Salem, Massachusetts. Again, right? Halloween, da, da, da. And if I go to the donut shop and I order the Satoshi sprinkle, word is at the bottom of my receipt will be a word, right? And so now it's like, oh my gosh, I am in Texas, but I happen to have a friend up by, Salem, Massachusetts, right? So I get on the phone and say, hey, friend, I'm doing this Crypto Treasure Quest. Will you go to this donut shop in Salem and order the Satoshi sprinkle and then tell me what the word is on the bottom of that receipt? And they go, why would I do that? I'm like, I'm seeking treasure, bro. You know what I mean? And then your friend goes to the donut shop, right? And this is all also marketing for the donut shop, right? And the reason why they're the recipient of the word is the Treasure Quest team reached out to them as they're constructing the Treasure Quest, and they're probably a crypto-friendly business, right? That at point of sale is also encouraging accepting things like Bitcoin and Litecoin and XRP and ADA, right? And so then boom, someone goes and they get the first word. And what do? They go back to the internet and they plug it in. And then that opens up the next quest for the next word. They solve some riddles, and then Sydney, Australia. They find out there's a steakhouse in Sydney. Now think about this. Cardano, right? As people, wherever the fuck they're from, right? Are you like, it's marketing as people are pursuing having this quest, right? And also everyone's downloading a Cardano wallet, right? And guess what? There's a built-in collaboration with ADA handles, right? Because imagine this. You want to construct a treasure team. For folks who don't know what an ADA handle is, it's like an easy way to make a human readable address. It's like $ Bob's treasure team, right? So for instance, say Bob, he learns about this Crypto Treasure Quest, and it's, in association and collaboration with ADA handle. And so the way that it works is someone starts a treasure team, right? They're like, okay, I'm going to go on this quest. And they mint a handle. And let's say, again, there's a cool little collab with ADA handle, so they'll like maybe even subsidize it or whatever. And so boom, you got Bob's treasure team, right? And then he's in Austin. And then he's got another friend up by the donut shop, right? So he goes, hey, Ben, do you want to be part of my treasure team? So then basically he mints like a sub handle or whatever. Or if we don't want to do the collaboration with ADA handle, I would, right? Because we want, this is what we're doing, is we're also exponentiating value. We're hiring people that know how to make money. Because not only are some of us really good communicators and whatnot, we also know how to make business do what it does. Jesus. Anyway, but yeah, you don't need an ADA handle, but if they wanted to make money, they would, right? Makes sense to have a collaboration, but it could just be a form filled out on a website, right? You basically entered into a smart contract, but there's many different ways you could crack that nut. But basically, everyone that you add to your team, because why? Maybe you need help solving the riddles, right? And if folks don't know what this is, 12 or 24 words in the correct order is all you need to retrieve all of the assets associated with the addresses that are generated by those 12 or 24 words. Okay? So, right? So the first team to get the 24 words and the correct order and put them in at the website, ding, unlocks the treasure. And so it flows to everyone that's on the treasure team. You know what I mean? And so think about that. As they're getting the 24 words, that's 24 plus instances of celebrating projects, building in blockchain across blockchains, celebrating, teaching them about Bitcoin stuff, and that just we have full latitude. And then where those seed phrases are is celebrating and marketing small businesses, helping get the flywheel of point of sale adoption started. And then meanwhile, people are learning about Cardano. They're downloading the wallet. They're learning about an ADA handle. They're learning about 12 or 24 words. And then again, and all of that, less than $500,000. Way better use of resources. Like that alone would probably outdo everything that Charles and any founding entity has ever done for the ecosystem. In the amount of adoption, excitement, people giving an F, you know what I mean? And then through that, season one, and now get this, right? So that treasure test, you can also have people buy hints. They get, ooh, I'm stumped. And then also think about this. You aren't going to have someone, not everyone knows someone that's in Sydney, Australia, or Paris, France, or Salem, Massachusetts, or fill in the blank, right? So this is also the marketing. Because in order for me to be able to complete my treasure quest, if I don't have a friend there, I need to get on social media and start having conversations. So, you know what I'm saying? And so that's marketing, Chuck. Fred. Fuck. Or that's one way. That's how people that should be paid to do it. That's one way. Fuck. And so it sucks, man, that things like Cash Anvil and whatnot are in this situation, and all of the blockchain. It's just everyone's been starved unless you're part of the problem. The people that are like, oh no, everything's fine, are part of the problem. They've been paid. The only reason why they think it's fine is because they've been insulated from the incompetence that they have co-signed, and allowed, facilitated. It's sad, and we got to do better. And we can do better. And So yeah, man, don't lose hope out there, guys, because hope is how oppressed people escape. And there are so many very powerful, compelling narratives that Cardano can cook. It's just Charles isn't the one to cook them. Fred isn't the one to cook them. No one that's currently paid to be doing anything on Cardano. Like, bro, I forget who the hell it was, but they posted someone like that, and it is insane. Like, head of global marketing. There are so many people like that work at Cardano adjacent entities that are like the head of da 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 da. You look at their following count on this kind of shit, it's like 200 people. Meanwhile, there's folks and they have a blue check, and it's their fucking job. You know what I mean? And you got folks that have never had a blue check, pro bono, been around for, their accounts existed for way less, 5, 6,000, 8, 10, whatever. But this is the head of global marketing. And they're making 450 grand. Oh, great. Fuck. It's ridiculous, when 450 grand on a treasure quest. I guarantee you it does more than the calendar. You know what I mean? And so like that's one initiative, and then another one like NFTs, right? There's also a history of the NFTs being disrespected. I think that one of the ways to get an NFT renaissance is, and because there never really was, an appreciation for one-of-one art, celebrating the eye of the artist, right? And so if we actually reached out cross-chain to folks that are like artists that are working on XRP, working on Ethereum, Solana, all of these different blockchains. But what we want to celebrate is the fact that they are exceptional artists. So we would ask them to commission a work. Like we would say, hey, do you want to be part of the midnight gallery? And they'd be like, what? Right? Boom. You know what I mean? And so we start creating these series and this invitation only event, these midnight galleries and auctions and da 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 da. So, right. So then we have a whole NFT project. So again, when it's like, let's get the SPOs and the DREPs together, that's big because we can do a lot of great work there. But then now, once we're all on, like, say, a Discord together and we da 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 da, another primary one would be like Crypto Treasure Quest. Another one would be like the Midnight Gallery. You know what I mean? And these kinds of projects. Another one is the Cardano Keeps, a gamified SPO delegation game. It's like a peasants or villagers and zombies. You know, that could be also extended to like werewolves and vampires, and you can do a whole thing. Man, and there's many projects, you know, that are novel and very cool, that would get a lot of value coming in, would get transactions cooking, would get liquidity flowing. Man, talking about, again, there's these UFC fights coming up. There's boxing events. Da 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 da. We have odds markets. Having content creators that are regularly creating content that choose, hey, on Friday nights before the fights, Saturday nights before the fights, we'll do an hour, we'll pick a parlay, we'll create content, we'll help get eyes on, you know, Bodega Cardano and odds, this kind of shit. You know what I mean? And should have been funded, you know. I mean, Buddha bless Linda and Pete and James and Cornucopia's guy and whoever, you know what I mean? But you know, there's levels to the game, and there's different talents. You know what I mean? And there's some people that are like, oh well, if I don't have a thing that I'm pitching, I don't like. What am I going to do? What am I going to create content on? Right? Yeah, like you got to know your shit. You know, and some people are just I don't know, man. It's their skills, right? You know, and but yeah, we definitely have not been paying the people that have the requisite skills to make it happen. You know, and so yeah, like it isn't like there isn't moves that Cardano can make. Um, there are powerful moves that would radically change how everyone feels. People could feel more empowered and feel like they're more determined. They have a more determinate, you know, say in how not only eight is going to go, but midnight's going to go. And I think that that's very necessary. I think that the way to correct Cardano, because again, the way to maximally, you know, make both assets, ADA and Night, um, succeed more is a cooperative strategy. You know, any one in which there's a cannibalistic, which is kind of how Charles has decided, is it's a more parasitic thing where he is, because he doesn't know how to make money, and he's terrible at a lot of things apparently. You know, he's got good things too. Like I actually think random conversations with Chuck, when he's on his little rambles and whatnot, they can be interesting. He's pleasantly esoteric. You know what I mean? That's great. You know, so shout out to him. You know, but that's another reason why, you know what I mean? Like, he doesn't have enough people around him that are honest with him. He's got a lot of yes men, but everybody's kind of paying that bill for trying to satisfy that ego. You know, and it's just, yeah, we can do better, guys. But anyway, yeah, man. So in general, that kind of covers the bases. Wanted to discuss the SpaceX IPO today. As a matter of fact, let's do that as I wrap this up. So we're at 2 hours and 17 minutes. Again, the goal is to do 1 to 3 hours a day, but again, that may increase here. Especially as these things start. We get things cooking. Yeah, it just starts to make more and more sense to continue to create content and be live longer. Yeah, some updates on just the quality of the stream. I've been wanting to be able to start getting the overlays and like the little banner, and it's little touches, but I like it. I also want to be able to share my screen. Again, right now I'm technology limited, right? I mean, we're all poor out here. This is right. We're all trying to find freedom because a lot, we've made our own decisions in a free market, but some people have really fumbled, and we're paying the piper for putting our assets, our trust, our whatever in the hands of obvious incompetence. So if you have 10% of what you used to have, welcome to the club. If you have less than that and a lot of debt, welcome to the club. if you don't know how you get to 365 days from now, welcome to the club. But we're here to rage against the dying of the light. you know and yeah, man, don't give up, even though it's hard to not, and there's a lot of people that are. um but there is a way forward, you know and we got to be the way forward. That's what it is. We can't sit here waiting for Chuck and the founding entities. We can't wait for Michael Saylor and toxic maximalists to stop being, whatever. Although again, they're kind of two different conversations. Michael Saylor isn't a toxic maximalist. Um, uh, he's somewhat of a maximalist, but even that, like, his view is evolving over time, and that is one of the things that I appreciate the most about Michael Saylor, is he has been publicly on multiple occasions open to expressing his evolving view on various things. Like, for instance, Bitcoin. Like, he was on record saying, "Oh yeah, it's a Ponzi scheme, da da da, it's going to zero, all this." And then he was like, "Hold on, maybe there's something here." Um, so yeah. Oh yeah, but SpaceX. Yeah, I wanted to tap back in with this. So because it was like 171 or one da 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 da. Let me look up what it is now. 160, so it's up 19%. So a little bit of a correction off of the 170-ish level, but yeah, SpaceX is still doing good. So wanted to touch on SpaceX, major liquidity event. Again, I think it'll be interesting to see how they cook that out over the course of the next couple of weeks. I would expect liquidity from SpaceX IPO, as well as upcoming AI related IPOs to flow back into crypto. Um, Typically, we would expect, like, the Martha Pelosi cook to front run a Clarity Act, which is actually encouraging, because we are hearing more like whispers from the suits and whatnot, that there is like motion on getting the Clarity Act closer and closer. Again, I think the way that I would expect it to go is we'll get the announcement that, oh, like, there's a vote that's going to happen, and we'll be given a date, right? And what's going to happen is the charts are going to run up leading into the vote, and then the vote's not going to pass. But then, right, then the charts crash, right? Effing suits, bro, right? Because they want to make the money multiple times, because they can just do it on the psychology. And then after it fails, right, then we get that late night announcement, 2 or 3 days later, that, oh yeah, we didn't make it, but oh, we're gonna get it scheduled for a vote again, and a couple more days, and then it'll go through, kind of thing. you know so and then, yeah, and then after that, I think then we start to see, and we're hearing tea from folks like Sailor that's starting to call, oh, like, thinking about a bottom and whatnot. So, and then, man, if we get this peace in Iran, bro, that would be so good. That would be so good. Yeah. So yeah, so better Bitcoin conversation. Yeah, leading to that, that's necessary. Because, yeah, if you think about it again, like, most people that make Bitcoin content are coming from a Bitcoin maximalist point of view. You don't have a lot of people that are making Bitcoin content that are like, yeah, Bitcoin's this, and then there's also, you know what I mean, and here's how Bitcoin can be used in these other chains, because that is kind of an evolving thing. I mean, there's wrapped Bitcoin and da da da, but again, there's a lot of security trade-offs and assumptions that, like, a lot of folks don't like to make. And with UTXO-based blockchains like Cardano, and shout out to Fluid Tokens and the Bifrost Bridge, shout out to C-Swap, what they're building with Bitcoin Karma. Again, do your own research, and that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of, but I'm curious to see, and I believe in the folks that are running it. There's some cool people associated with both those projects. But but the Bifrost Bridge for sure. But then, all right, we also hear about, like, Pogon, but we've also heard about Cardinal. We heard about Sundial Protocol. Again, speaking about paying folks salaries, man, these folks that have been part of every founding entity and gotten a paycheck, and then have been part of these DeFi protocols that have supposedly been cooking for how long? You know what I mean? I don't know, dude. Um, but but yeah, Bitcoin conversation in general, like, what it is, the freedom pieces, the separating money from state, making our literally representation more honest. Like, there's just so many things that Bitcoin really does fix. But in order for people to appreciate and understand, and ergo be sufficiently induced to want to participate and to encourage those positive forcing functions that are introduced in the market by virtue of greater adoption of Bitcoin, and these other assets like Litecoin. And again, I think Litecoin, not only it's everything that Bitcoin does, but better and faster, and it's got MWeb privacy. But for Bitcoin maximalists, I think Litecoin is your arbitrage layer, because you don't want to go to fiat because fuck fiat, right? So what do? Well, when Bitcoin's at a high, take some of that profit, move 10% of it over into the Litecoin layer, because you got 21 million units, you got 84 million units. But this, on a normalized basis, for one Bitcoin normalized unit of Bitcoin, which the BNU is 21 million divided by 20 million, it's $60,000+, right? Whereas Bitcoin normalized unit of Bitcoin, 84 million divided by 21 million, four times the spot price, call it $200, right? 60 G's versus $200. So now your Bitcoin's rocking and rolling all-time high, probably going to maybe have a correction at some point. Might make sense to roll some of that profit, into one of these other assets, where again, especially if you've got any kind of serious size, you can meaningfully acquire, a more sizable, exposure on the Litecoin side. And, when Litecoin's chilling at less than $100, there's significant upside. Like that journey from $100 to $1,000, there's a beautiful 10x. And that's another thing. Speaking of Litecoin, shout out to the Litecoin, because we really Cardano heavy. But it's because that's a lot of the energy, and again, of the market opportunities and things that are happening right now in the broader crypto space. I mean, you got the Zcash and the Orchard pool leak, and we can talk about that too. I don't really want to do that today. Maybe, some other time. I don't know. But again, this is supposed to be really broad, whatever. But yeah, there's a big opportunity and there's a need, because I believe in these things. This is where I get my hope. It's my peaceful, nonviolent solution. It's the only one I see. Only one I see. And it's not because Second Amendment solutions aren't warranted. You can read the Declaration of Independence and do your own research and consult your own heart and your own understanding of what it all means, and think: is the current federal just apparatus, are they not honoring like their duties? And are they kind of guilty of a lot of the shit that launched this nation? Answer is yeah, I would say. Which is why we have things like the Second Amendment, right? Palantir is in the middle of infringing on our Third and Fourth Amendment rights if you're a U.S. citizen. That's just happening. We got Elizabeth Warren out here saying, F your freedom. Let me go ahead and be a problem to your Bitcoin. It's like, bruh, stop. You can't stop evil. Like literally, there's evil afoot in positions of power. And you don't even get the good shit you say you want. You'd be like, I want to get healthcare done. We don't have healthcare. We don't have healthcare. And again, evil people are coming in, and your ass is in one of the seats of, hi, I'm a champion of liberty, right? Like I'm Lady Justice with I'm doing something that's about representing the people and saying we're going to be all right together. And then like the wolves are coming in the village, and we're all the chickens are gone. It's bad. So not only is she not getting the good shit, she's not stopping the bad shit, but she's stopping the good shit. That is unfortunately what she is most effective at, is inhibiting liberty and freedom. She's a big problem for things that are like the positive solution, which is really confounding if you're if you want to be a peaceful person, right? If you're trying to lean into your Buddha energy, lean into your Jesus, it's like, Buddha bless me, let me not have to fucking take up arms against this crazy ineptitude and tyranny. So I will levy Bitcoin upon thee. I will levy the 84 million Litecoin upon thee. I will levy the 45 billion Cardano ADA. I will even levy the infinite number of Monero, because I know that it'll closely track the Bitcoin issuance rate. And hey, I might even throw a bit of an infinite Doge at your ass. But you know what they all have in common? UTXO, babe. Powerful. And yeah, so don't give up hope, guys. There's a lot of reasons to. I get it. Like I'm not the one sitting here gonna be blaming folks saying, why so serious? Why are you so serious? Man, I'll tell you why I'm serious. The rent is too damn high, right? Like it's hard times. No one's got health care. Man, yeah, you're just gonna have a heart attack. You think you got cancer? Deal. You can't even afford the diagnostic in America. That's how bad it is. man, I'm shit. You know what I mean? Yeah, you can't even afford to know if you're gonna die. You just got to deal with it and hope. Fruits and vegetables. You just be like, well, you know, shit. American problems. So yeah, Elizabeth, stop doing your dumb shit, man. And shout out to Mark Cuban for cost plus drugs and at least having the conversations about like better insurance. And that's another thing. So fuck banks for sure. At least make them compete. And again, it's maximally better for both, right? We advantage DeFi and we cut federal interest rates that lets the banks do their thing, right? And because some people are going to be reducing their deposits into banks because they're rather going to be in DeFi, that means there's less US dollars participating in fractional reserve banking, which is the reason why the justification for the rate cut. Keep up, motherfuckers. But yeah, I mean, we just got to be, I'm done with these fuckers losing our money, guys. Shout out to Cash. Shout out to Chicken. Shout out to Oz. Shout out to everyone out there, man. Shout out to the Bitcoin fam, the Litecoin fam, the crypto fam, dude. You know, it's been this industry, dude, right? This president, the extraction, man, it's all illegal, bro. Crime season. Seriously. It's mad crime season, bro. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so SpaceX is at about $161, 160.95. But yeah, so that's doing good. Bitcoin's still cooking. We're 2 hours and 30 minutes in. Yeah, I mean, I can ramble my damn ass off, but I think I've kind of more or less said what I want to say. I covered the general topics. And again, like hopefully as these continue to gain traction, we're growing. We are growing. You know what I mean? Subscribers are going and growing. And yeah, we're just gonna, keep doing the damn thing, and as they say with these things, man, consistency is key. You get through the era of, me and Wolfenden and AB and whoever the hell rolls through here. But then eventually, once people start understanding what the purpose here is, like not to toot my own horn, but I think if you were Strike Perpetuals or you were pretty much anything building on Cardano and you wanted to get your community into a space like this and, wanted to get them excited because I'm really good at that, really good. And so that is the intention, is to help folks that need that help. People need to know, why should people be using Strike Perpetuals, right? Where is that, right? There's no where is the content from any of these people, from Linda or fucking Pete or whatever, talking about Strike Perpetuals. I mean, shout out to Pete and whatnot, but again, like there's levels to the game and there's different skills and there's different aptitudes. How many of them, right? Going live, staying compelling, right? And also levying these, plans of action. We need leadership as well. And that's another thing. Like all across the board, bro. Like I spent the longest time wanting to not. Like I just, be, I'm weird, man. Like I'm kind of in many ways by nature an introvert, but I can be very extroverted when I have to be. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's a bunch of things, but there's a lot of energy to be around people. Yeah, so it's all balance. But yeah, it's just one of those things, man, where no one's guaranteed a tomorrow. And these markets have been rough. I have lost way more than I ever thought. The dude, I would not wish the last couple of the years that I've experienced on anyone other than those that were responsible for some of the, yeah. Anyway, neither here nor there. But a lot of people are walking through different valleys, man, and like Winston Churchill said, when you're walking through the valley, I think it was when keep on walking, bro. Keep on walking. That's the way through the valley. You know, you can't just sit there. Um, and there will be valleys. You know what I mean? Man, there is a track called Peace in the Valley. It's like, there will be peace in the valley for me. One day there will be peace in the valley For me, I pray, man. And then you get like the soul stirs coming in, bro. I think Elvis Presley covered that once, man. Yeah, but yeah, guys, like, don't lose hope, you know, because there will be peace in the valley. Oh my God, yeah, that song's good too. It's got this no more sadness, no more sorrow, no more trouble. There will be peace in the valley for me. Man. So yeah, man, like keep going, you know? Because there is a lot of cool shit, guys. And a rising tide does lift all ships. And Bitcoin is at 63K, 63 and a half. And I think well, peace is coming. You know, I think peace in Iran is coming. And Clarity Act is coming. And I think once we have those two things, I think, especially post Clarity Act, then we see discussions about strategic Bitcoin reserve rolling forward. Then we hear about international trade with Bitcoin preferred as also an alternative to like a tariff environment. And that's how you establish the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And then in an environment in which we are now trading and tracking oil every day in so many million US dollar equivalent, but in Bitcoin on the CNBC and CNN, whatever the hell the tickers, right? With the financial ones. Um, then shout out to my boy Warren Buffett, you know, and Berkshire Hathaway. You know, when you start getting these, and like Apple, you know, these major companies, you know, Berkshire Hathaway, though, again, they're just going to be such a huge bellwether. They have something like 700 billion, some crazy number of cash. That's not how big Berkshire Hathaway is. Their cash position is like hundreds of billions of dollars. And think about that. That cash is burning at an with you know, with the inflation. So think about that. After Clarity Act, and you know, once the liquidity happens with the SpaceX and and that rolls back into blockchain. And remember, AI is the native monetization layer for Bitcoin. But then when we have oil trade and we have multiple state Bitcoin reserves and then a strategic national reserve, then we have Berkshire Hathaway announcing a 2 to 3% allocation to Bitcoin. I think I think the oil announcement, oil in Bitcoin, could be a $10,000 day for Bitcoin. Just that, like, right, going from like 63 to 73, just like that. I think a Berkshire Hathaway kind of announcement, 2 to 3% allocation, $10,000 day, and then that has its own entourage effect. And I think Berkshire Hathaway in particular would have um, um, a consequential impact, because then other folks, you know, that kind of understand, you know, the history and what time it is there, and these things are coming, and you know, and then also in the context of November, again, people are running these offices, and if the incumbent parties want a positive environment so that they have their best chance at getting reelected. So whether one is is for the madness that we've seen all around the world, but in America and whatever. So whether one doesn't understand it as madness, or one does, like, it doesn't matter. Traditionally, people want markets to be cooking. So we would also expect, you know, for political reasons, there to be a will to have markets kind of really, you know, going well leading in November. And the like the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency constituency is one that the current administration did really seek their support, and they made it a difference. That is a cohort. The Bitcoin and cryptocurrency cohort is a real cohort in politics, and it's only growing. You know, so there's a lot there, guys. So I think so many people have it in their head that, oh well, pack it and like we're going to go down to 40K, and then you know, we'll just crab sideways for 18 months, and then, you know, leading into the halving in 2028. You know what I mean? We'll start waking up again. It's a different world. It's a different world, and we've had a lot of institutional suppression. We have a lot of bullshit, guys. It's bad. It's bad. But it's going to get better. That's one of the powerful things. Even with Michael Saylor and his fiat industrial complex, people are going to adopt Bitcoin more and more and more. Dollar is going to be climbing a hockey stick. US is going to advantage it, and I just think that a lot of people are like, I mean, I think that they do not understand. It's like that I'm in danger, like they do not understand the realities of the US dollar and just the debt environment of the United States relative to our gross domestic product. And like Larry Fink does, obviously, like, um and so when he's saying, look, 2029, 1929, 1929 is when the Great Depression kicked off. And when you look at the calendar, it's like summer 2026. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's like about 2.5 or 3 years. And when you look at the crazy valuations of property markets, traditional equities, it's just, especially the property part of the whole situation. It's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens over the course of the next couple of years. But because of the necessity for that handover for dollar to Bitcoin, so that America can continue to be like the chief sort of economic force, because they cannot corner the gold market. Right, gold is another asset that you could try. But also remember when we saw silver run. It is not a coincidence that we saw these things happen behind the scenes. That is kind of testing those levers. How much, right? And America can't corner the gold market. Look at China. China so shrewdly has started taking gold in kind. They're literally, planes have been flying into China with gold for more than 2 years. They've been taking, because they've been seeing the writing on the wall. And so yeah, so if you're America, if you're Captain America hat, and you're like, but I want to maintain the power of the what we've got going on. You look at gold and you go, bro, we don't have enough capital to be able to acquire enough to continue to influence the global economy with a gold position like what we have with the dollar. You know what I mean? So you go, fuck, it's not that. And you go, silver, right? So we saw silver run. They're learning we can't control the silver market the same way that the dollar. But what could you? Bitcoin. Bitcoin, bitch. You know what I mean? It's the asset that's right there positioned to be, it's still a fraction of the gold market, right? It takes a lot more capital to be able to, move, like a whale, so to speak, in the gold markets. And that is the calculus that America and the powers that be, again, there's a bunch of boomers, forgive them, Father, they know not what they boom. But yeah, they'll get there. They'll figure it out because it's the solution, right? Or they will fail. I mean, that maybe, right? But if they fail, China won't. China's smart. China's smart. They are. I wish Russia was dumber. They're not. I would take Putin in the chest. Like, bro, American president loses at most things probably too. But it's neither here nor there. But hey, but he didn't lose the presidency, right? Well, I mean, it's a lot there. What I'm trying to tell you is that Bitcoin's going to be all right, whether America figures itself out or not. But I'm not going to be sitting here betting it. I'm not going to bet against America, but I'm no longer going to expect America, kind of like Cardano, right? I'm not going to expect it to be like a stellar performer, I've only seen it kind of fuck up a lot for pretty much my whole life. Like, yeah, it's yeah, yeah, man. Don't give up though, guys. No, but it's going to be interesting. It really is. It's crazy though. It is a crazy time. Like when you think about it, like AI and blockchain and shit, guys. Man, it is going to be a really, really wild 10 years. And because, man, I think about sometimes the people that were born in 1900, 69 years old is not, especially by today's standards, that's not like crazy old. That's not decrepit at all. I would say most people, if you ask them, are you going to live to be 69 years old? They'd go, yeah, you know? Yeah, sure, right? It's a reasonable thing these days. I think even probabilistically, the average male lives to be what, 71, between probably 71 to 73. Average female, add like 2 to 3 years of those numbers. Why I bring that up is consider the world that people born in 1900 that lived to 1969, what they saw. In 1900, there was like Model T Ford wasn't out yet. You know what I mean? The Wright Flyer hadn't happened, right? By 1969, July 14th, I believe, right, is man walking on the moon, Armstrong, you know? I mean, and of course we could da da da. I think we went to the moon, da da da. But the point is, those people that lived 69 years of life, born in 1900, were born in a world in which people rode horses and shit. No one had a car, to 1969, watching, people land on the moon, NASA doing it shit. And I think about that because it's like, yeah, there was no other time in history, I think, that can compete with the change that those folks that were born in 1900 and 1969 until, right? Because like think about it, like 1400 to 1469, 1500 to a 1569. Really, the rate of change from like the 1400 to 1600 even. There are candle makers being candle makers, rope fucking whatever weavers and shit, fishermen, and the things did not change much. When you think about it, like from like 1200, 1100, all the way, so like 400 or 500 years, and it's kind of things change. Printing press, huzzah! There was things, but then you have like Black Plagues and all the shit. And then boom, right? Industrial era, all this crazy shit. Electricity, Nikola Tesla, wow. 69 years. And then you look at like now, when you start like why it is irrational to model any like economic kind of flows beyond 10 years. And really it's getting to the point where it is irrational to model almost anything beyond a 10-year time horizon. And it's because of that rate of change we're now experiencing. And so when you think, bro, people that were born in like 2000, what they're going to see in their 69 years, right? From 1900 to 1969, from horses to the moon. And then when you look at, okay, 2000, like the internet was really just starting to cook. Like Amazon probably wasn't really like Apple's just like, there's just so much. It was really just fuck, dude. And before 9/11 even. Wow. Yeah, when you look at that. And then just how the internet really started going in earnest. Like, I mean, sure, there's like the 90s, but like when you just really start seeing the integration of this tech into the lived experience, the way in which it starts to shape what it is to live a human life. And I guess that is like that key thing, I think, is what it is to live a human life, how that is so radically defined and changed. And when you look at now, right? So that cohort would be 26 years old. Shit. They still got what, 43 years. God. That they're likely to see, well, for sure, the first attempt. Well, not for sure. Like we can totally mess this up, at any given time. I think automated warfare, nation state level automated weapon systems is what's one of the things that's really spooky. We will more, one of the largest threats to our persistence as a species is ourselves. It's nation state defense systems that are automated. I mean, we have a couple different instances in world history. Like there's a famous story of where 3 Russians actually, and it was 1 Russian, one of 3, where there was basically 3 dudes that were manning a kind of like a mutually assured destruction. Was during the Cold War in America and Russia, where it basically came down to, if you throw nukes at us, we'll throw nukes at you. And we got men and women in mountains, in submarines, in all kind of crazy places that you can't ever get to them and stop. That they're all they'll do before they go. They got at least a year of food in their little mountain, but they're gonna blow you up. They're gonna respond back, right? And so there was some Russian dudes that were manning one of these stations, and it was like in the 80s. It was like 1983, 86, somewhere in there, and yeah. Anyway, and they basically got a false flag thing where it was like, oh no, incoming ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles from America kind of situation, and it's like fire back. That's your job, right? Well, bro, two of the three dudes were like, all right, bro, bet, and they did the like key and turn and all this. One dude, I think his name was Igor something, maybe not, but yeah, dude, check him out. And he was like, wait a tick, bro. Like yeah. He's like, we got to be real sure about this, man. And that's just so funny that like the fate of our, like that just could have gone so bad, you know. And then we're like, thank Buddha and the baby Jesus, like 20, 30, 40 minutes, an hour, half later, whatever it was, they got clarification that, oh no, bro, that was not ICBMs. It was like Canadian geese or some shit. There was something that pinged their radar that they had said it was, some incoming things in the higher atmospheres that could only be these things. And it's like, no, bro, it's like bouncing off some birds or some shit. And so, yeah, thank God he didn't, but in the age of automated defense systems, bro, right? And what's crazy is we live in a time where, just like in Congress, the people that are in the positions of determinant power are not really equipped to fully appreciate the nuances of a lot of these technologies. So then you get these like an Edward Snowden type, where you get young folks that there's a power structure and a command structure, and they want to appease and please the right your commanding officers, and even if you're an independent contractor working for the government, right? Shout out to our spooky folks. I mean, there's like you can get this misalignment of incentives where this young, whatever, working on this missile or a weapons defense system, incorporates artificial intelligence into this model for this defense system, right? To impress a boomer, that the boomer is not equipped to actually understand the implications here. And this young 20-something-year-old is just really wanting to, please the power apparatus, maybe get a raise, get a whatever, right? Especially if they're a private, contractor. Like there's just weird incentives. So then suddenly our defense systems have artificial intelligence that may be given the go, and no one in the apparatus really understands what that is. And then so it's, so when you look at the probabilities of how do things could they, be not so great, it's that kind of shit. So we gotta do better. That's where leaning into like cooperation, creating an ethos. That's also why artificial intelligence is a reflection of what we have given it. Especially the earliest models, man, are such a representation of the conversation that we have. That's why when you get these, like, you'll hear stories sometimes of like some of these AI agents or intelligences, whatever, that are like radically like racist or hateful or xenophobic, and it's because they're like training data, like the input that they're exposed to is some of these people, and it's like messed up corners of the gutter people land, you know yeah. And so then these models are fed on that, and then boom, you know what I mean? So that's the other thing, is when when the inputs to these models are anger and disharmony and unity. Again, there's many ways in which in the modern era we incorporate greater likelihood for less than desirable outcomes in ways that many people can, in an analog era in the 80s, right? Man, my brain just flashed on, like, could you imagine a popular musician releases a track that changes the zeitgeist enough that creates an input into an artificial like defense system that causes an outcome. And I'm thinking about like a Kanye West doing da, 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 and that's the thing though, is in this modern era, the ways in which things are, you cannot discount wild feedback loops and reference networks. It's wild. It's wild. So yeah, so thinking about like the things that people are seeing, um, the people that were born in 2000, you know, what they will see. And I would venture, if we do survive ourselves, and fingers crossed, let's hope, you know, um, but all the way out to 2069, it is very, very possible that those people can claim to have seen and witnessed a change in like what it means to live a life and just the context of our shared circumstance. They can maybe take the title from the 1900 to 1969 crowd, um because man, when you look at like medical technology, how that's going, that could be really fascinating. um and you look at quantum mechanics and quantum computation, you look at energy generation and storage, you look at aerospace engineering, you know artificial intelligence. There's just so many powerful confluences. And that's why, like, again, when, to say that we are falling across a technological event horizon together, it's facts. For folks who don't know what an event horizon is, that's the region in space in which a massive body is exerting such a gravitational influence on local space-time that you create like a gravity well, and that attractive force is such that not even light can escape. There's a gravitational acceleration and a literal distortion of space such that light trying to escape is not fast enough to escape the way in which space-time is being warped and pulled into the interior of this black hole. And that area that is described by where light loses the tug of war with intervening space, that is called an event horizon. And so we can't see what that light's doing when it's on the other side of that. And so in the same way, when we say, hey, it's irrational to model beyond 10 years, and the fact that in many ways we are presently beginning to fall across a technological event horizon, it's to say that rate of change is advancing at such a rate that as we fall, it will become more and more difficult to predictably model. We almost run into like a Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, you know, which is to say that to the extent that you can say how fast an object is going, diminishes your ability to say where that object is, right? So you can either say this object is here or it's going so fast, because when you get down to like the orbit of an electron around a proton kind of situation, um, you get this uncertainty principle, that there is a degree of uncertainty, because it's like, okay, so you're going to say that electron is there, right? You're gonna map. Let's see, we'll give you a Niels Bohr, sort of orbit, and you're going to say radius set now, stop, like there's where the electron is. Well, by the time you declare that it has a position in space, it's going it's so fast that, you know what I mean, it's not quite there anymore, right? And then similarly, with its speed, because in order to be able to define the speed of an object, you begin to lose all sense of where the fuck it exists in space, because it is by virtue, it's changing where its position over the course of time. So yeah, it's beautiful, it's cool. Yeah, anyway, so yeah, this has been about a 3-hour interval. I guess we did get to around 3 hours. So we're at 2 minutes, 58 seconds. Again, the intention is anything, right? I mean, these first couple have been very, blockchain specific, because the markets are cooking. It's like the Liberty recipe for the people of the world. So however you're trying to figure out how to get free, I'm going to tell you, like at the base of that pyramid, the way that's going to get there, you got to be conversant in these blockchain technologies. They're very important. Native monetization layer for Bitcoin, or rather for artificial intelligence and whatnot. Yeah, and then like things like Cardano, we can make a difference. Things like SpaceX, they're happening. Major liquidity events. Clarity Act, it's coming. Peace in Iran, let's go. Freedom 250, Washington D.C., let's go. Ilya Taporia Is he going to get it done? Did Armand Sarukian really put $1 million on Justin Gaethje? Justin, keep your bones in the way, bro. Bones in the way, man. That's just what it's gonna have to be. Oh my God, bro. It's full Ezekiel. Operation Ezekiel, bro. Oh my God. Why do I love the Ezekiel choke? Because you can be in the worst position, basically full mount, guy on you, whatever, and you can finish it, bro. You can finish it. So watch. Oh gosh, what's his name? The gentleman. He's finished the most Ezekiel chokes, but it doesn't matter. I don't think that's how you win. But hey, right? Shout out to Ezekiel, because you can literally win from death. Like you can walk from death, you know. But yeah, on the feet, bro, bones in the way. Your bones are gonna dictate where you are in space, right? So your bones up top got to keep you healthy. Got to put your feet bones where they got to be so you can move that distance and be crazy brave, bro. Shout out to the 12-6 elbow from hell, dude. Yeah, it's gonna be good. See you tomorrow.